anyone whose assessment has changed because either I made a change via a reassessment or a neighborhood factor or a property class change, if I make that change, those people will get a notice. However, if the county assessor places a multiplier, which the effect is it would basically change the assessment of everyone in the township based on the county multiplier, those people will not be getting a notice. So I've been working with the county assessor on ways that even though the county is not going to send those notices out, if there's something that our office can do, because I think it's important for our residents to know about changes in their assessment so they can appeal if necessary. And that's all.
Okay, thank you. Mary Alice.
So Wayne, about that, is there some place that a resident can log in and see exactly what they're being charged between last year and this year and what multiplier is being applied to them?
Not exactly that. As soon as we finalize our numbers, we're gonna place the values on our website. The county, I would assume, would place the changes on their website, but I'm not sure. As far as showing the difference, I mean, people can do the math on their own, but to see a exact percentage change, I doubt that's going to be on either of the websites.
So my concern is, and correct me if I'm not remembering this correctly, I think that you only have like 6 weeks, I think in July, in the beginning, maybe the beginning of August, to file, I guess, a complaint against your assessment. Is that accurate at the county level?
So typically you have from July 1 until September 10th to file that assessment complaint. You have from July 1 until September 10th. So, and I think I understand where you're going because it's something I'm concerned about too. With the lack of notice, people may not know that they need to file an appeal. So one thing that I've looked into doing is sending out postcards to everybody because I think that would be the most effective way if there is a multiplier change.
So
a multiplier, especially if it's positive. If it's negative, I'm less inclined to.
Sure.
But
so you would send out if the county, sorry, if the state says that we'll have a multiplier, then you would send county. If the county says that we're going to have a multiplier, then you would send out postcards to every resident in.
It's not a definite. I'm exploring it because I think it's important for people to be aware of changes in their assessment. It's
And
not something
is this
we're required to do.
Is this taking place this year?
Yes. Wait, I'm sorry. I don't. Can you? What do you mean? I want to make sure.
The fact that they're not mailing out.
This will be a new change this year. Yes.
It's impacted right now. So we just paid our first installment on June 1st.
Right. But again, the taxes you paid this year was based off the assessment in January 1.
Right. Okay. So we basically have maybe 8 months to figure out how to be able to help notify people with changes.
No. Ideally, if you're going to notify someone of a change, you want to do it as much time before September 10th as possible because September 10th is the deadline to appeal an assessment. So, ideally you want to, if we got our assessments in tomorrow, right, or Wednesday, it'll take some time for the county to figure out if there's going to be a multiplier and what that's going to be. And, it might take 10 days. So best case scenario, we're looking at the beginning of July on trying to determine if we're going to send anything out like that.
Okay. I'm worried about the timing.
I am too.
If that's the county, right, that determines the July 1st to the September 10th?
Yes.
Have they discussed at all changing that date?
No.
They haven't.
So legally, after the assessor makes an adjustment, a taxpayer typically has 30 days to appeal legally. What the county does is they actually extend that out because we typically get our assessments complete by, the end of June, which would technically give people until the end of July. But what the county does to be pro taxpayers, extend it out till September 10th.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the update. It's important for the public to know.
I agree.
Dennis.
Yes, and I would really encourage you, Wayne, to send out postcards. It's not as expensive as a letter, but I think everybody needs to have a notice that things have changed. People are pretty.
Agree, Dennis, and that's why I looked at doing postcards, because it would be cheaper significantly. I've talked to a company about designing said postcard, but we're talking about sending it out to almost 11,000 parcels. So, I mean, like I said, I haven't made the decision yet. I think it's unfortunate that basically this cost has been transferred to the township, but it's not something that we can control.
Well, if there's a change, people are really anxious about hearing about it. So be wise to do it if we can. Thank you.
Jared.
Wayne, regardless of the postcard situation, once we find out if they do add a multiplier and people need to be aware of it, we should definitely probably announce it at every town board meeting that if people are tuning in, to spread the word as much as we can. Put it on the town board website, put it on the city website, get that word out as much as possible so people know to look out for it. And if you need assistance in designing a postcard, I could probably help with that and save the township some money.
Oh, great.
So
aesthetics is not my thing.
hit me up about that. I'd be happy to help.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. We'll move on to unfinished business. I don't believe there is any. New business is the ordinance, which is approving the annual budget and appropriation ordinance. Danielle?
Thank you. So in the supervisor's memo, I have clearly delineated by line item any changes between the draft and the final. I just want to go over the big strokes train changes so you're aware. Probably the biggest thing is I actually decreased assistance. That was the biggest dollar. I was really concerned that we would be at 190 on average this next year. It's possible that could happen, but I've just been watching the patterns and I think we can safely go down to 175, which is a pretty, $50,000 plus or $40,000, $54,000 difference. Second, because we are seeing some additional rental assistance and from the state of Illinois come to our community, I think we can safely go down in rental assistance from 120 to 100,000, knock on wood. I do want to point out that the evictions, the stay on evictions lifts at the end of this month. And I would probably use the word terrified to articulate how I feel about that fact. So I am, that said, there's been a lot of pressure at the state to provide additional dollars. I know the city of Urbana has come to the table and has CDBG funds that are COVID related. I think if we all work together, then the township can go down in its expenses. So those are two biggies. I did, in looking at administrative hours that are required to handle such a large jump in our general assistance statistics, I've had to increase the administrative hours slightly. So I'm really looking at a less than $20,000 increase, but I do need some additional hours. We've been really crunched. I had a calculation error in health insurance, which I addressed, as well as IMRF. So those were estimates and I got a more accurate picture. I also went ahead and decreased other grants from 68 to 50,000. And as you may have heard, both shelters, women and men's, is going to stay open year round, which is an enormous relief and a huge benefit to our participants. So I'm expecting less need for possible grant support in that area. So generally speaking, we've been able to reduce the overall liability. We are still spending through surplus. I'm hoping that next year we see a much smaller general assistance and rental assistance level than I'm anticipating, in which case we will burn through less surplus. If not, I think this year is probably a good time for us to spend some of that surplus to lessen the blow for our participants and community members. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Mary Alice?
So one of the things in your budget you reference are legal fees, and I was wondering if you could talk about your strategy to decrease the legal fees.
Thank you. So I did decrease legal fees, which have, with the Carl case and several property tax cases, have really escalated. We had over 100,000 last year. We're on track to do over 60,000 this year. I have spoken with Wayne, and I have made a commitment in our office to really rein in the legal costs. Some of those costs have to do with the number of times we communicate with legal staff, whether or not we're reaching out to other resources first before communicating with legal staff. I've even considered, do we need a legal support at every single town board meeting? I will have to explore that. But there are plenty of board meetings where they may not be necessary. I also will be looking at legal invoices carefully and making sure that Wayne and myself are reviewing them monthly, and that we see, not that I think there are errors in the invoices because I do check them, but we should talk about any ways in which we can reduce spikes in the invoicing. So that's one area that I think we're going to need to, provide some fiscal constraint, because we've certainly seen it balloon.
All right. I have other questions, but I'll let other people ask, so I don't take up.
Jared?
Danielle, I may have glanced over it, but are we planning, even though we're planning to decrease the overall amount in GA, are we planning to increase what participants receive with inflation and all that from 300 that we're doing currently?
Unfortunately, no. We have been following DHS and Township Supervisors of Illinois guidance on that, which actually sets the recommended limit at 304, which is what City of Champaign Township has. We set it at 300 because the accounting of the $4 is really onerous. And we'll continue to monitor that, but because we see a potential, we're already seeing an increase in participants, I'm worried about that. Certainly if it's the town board's decision to, along with salaries, increase GA, I would be 100% on board with that, but we will need to address the levy gap, and I will be bringing a proposal to you shortly to be doing that.
Okay, I didn't see it, so I figured it was staying the same, and I was interested to hear your perspective on, I know we were increasing to try and get up to inflation levels, and I don't know if the township, if you feel like the township's assessment of what that value is appropriate or not, based on what they're advising, or if we should consider that. But I was just curious, if we're going to be making a plan for inflation and all of that. And philosophically, if you think it's better to spread out and help more people, or more help focus on fewer people with better assistance.
Mm-hmm. So two things. First, the fastest way to respond to you is to say that I have spoken with former participants who were able to pay rent with general assistance back in the day, and it is not kept up with inflation or cost of rent. And so, it really is just a portion of what someone would need to survive, which is a real problem for someone who's disabled and unable to work. Secondly, I think that I would like us to consider what I would say general assistance is an entitlement. Certainly the rules are written both by the township officials of Illinois and the supervisor, and both with policy and practice, you can decrease or increase general assistance participants. I have continued to have a community work program, which I think has greatly reduced the general assistance roles from what they would be if that did not exist. And I would argue that we should continue with that. But I would love in the future, if possible, someone who is disabled and homeless and literally cannot work. I would love to be able to make sure that they receive what they need to have a home. And I think about this all the time in terms of what it would take to get there. If that's negotiating with landlords, $400 a month, efficiency apartments, we pay directly to landlords instead of a check. There's a lot of things I'd like us to think about going forward, because my goal is to eliminate homelessness in Urbana, and I think it's possible.
Thank you.
Sharice and then Bill.
Yeah, what I want to know, Danielle, is it still with your rental assistance and stuff, people can only use that once within how many months?
It's so they can use it once in 2 years, and we're restricted by Illinois law to make that at least once every year. So we could go down to once every year if we so choose. But right now, the rule that we share with the county and the city of Champaign Township is up to $600 in a one-time payment once every 2 years.
Okay.
Bill, did you have a question?
Yeah, just on the assessor budget, Wayne, I noticed you did say you spread out the personnel other costs between 2 years, I think, to do the digitizing and updating the cards and everything. So do you anticipate after this year you'll be able to drop that personnel other line, that $30,000?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And how about for travel? I noticed it's the same as the previous fiscal year, ending this month. Did you? I didn't get a chance to look at the latest spending. Did you spend all of that this year, even with?
No, I expect to spend about 62% of what was budgeted, if not less. A lot of things were canceled, but literally they are being rescheduled. I got 5 emails today about trainings that were canceled and then are being rescheduled for later in the year. They say they're having one on leasehold and partial interest in August, and one on valuing self-storage facilities at the end of July. We'll see. I'm really kind of surprised, considering a lot of assessors are quite frankly elderly, but
Yeah, has this encouraged any of the training organizations to move some of that online, so at least you wouldn't have the expense of travel and hotel?
We've seen the IAAO move things online, but so far it's been the basic courses. Every bit of training that we do is to address a need within the office, right? So like the self-storage one is a need that I've identified. The leasehold was a need that I identified. We had a lot of appeals based on leasehold values last year that caused some big drops. I want to do a land. I'm going to probably end up doing a land course, but because that's also a big need in a township, I'm actually going to probably have the teacher come here, and we'll probably have several other townships join us in that. That'll actually be cheaper than having everyone go out and go to the training. So I'm looking forward to that. But that was something that was supposed to happen in next month, actually, that is going to be postponed, looks like, until later in the year. So, we'll see.
Okay, thanks.
Dennis?
Yeah, an item under the supervisor's budget is the clerk's salary, and it has gone from 0 to 3,700. Is that a new part-time position, Danielle, I wonder?
Sure, I'm managing on your pad time. Hold on a second. Here we go. Okay.
That's probably moving from one part of the budget to another.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we decided to move the clerk's salary from town fund that doesn't have any other salaries into supervisor, because it makes it administratively easier to pay taxes since we do that class by class. So it's a straight move. You all authorized a clerk salary or a stipend, and it's reflected here.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Mary Alice, did you have more questions?
I did, yeah. So one of the things that you note is the IMRF payback. So you've removed that payback, and I'm wondering where we stand with the amount there. So are we caught up, I guess is a better way of asking the question, or do we still have something to catch up to?
Wait, you want to answer that?
Yeah, we're not all the way caught up, but we're pretty much caught up. And what I like to add is, even though our salaries have gone up modestly, our IMRF contributions are going down, and that's because our IMRF contribution, because we've paid down the unfunded liability, our IMRF contribution as a percentage of salary has gone down. That'll continue. Some of that has to do with the percentage of Tier 2 employees versus Tier 1 employees, but also a big chunk of that is paying down the unfunded liability. Now, there were investment losses toward the end of last year. Now the investments are kind of crazy because of the economy. So we could find ourselves in a hole, but it'll be a much smaller hole than it otherwise would have been when it comes to the unfunded liability.
Do you have a rough estimate on what that is right now?
No, it's I'm sorry, on what, the actual unfunded liability?
Yes.
Oh, it's like less than $1,000.
Okay, because I think we've been spending for the past couple of years $100,000 to bring that into alignment. Is that correct?
About.
Okay, all right. And then my next question is, you had discussed social service funding in the budget and moving it more to a fee for service. So this is kind of a bit of a complex question. The social services funds right now a variety of different programs. Included that is healthcare consumers. Sometimes we have funding for Meals on Wheels, and we have homeless shelters and so forth. So part A is, what do you envision that fee for service with those types of services that are still needed in our community that Township can't provide? And part B is, we're setting aside $50,000 for kind of emergency grants with homeless. So should that be reflected in our social service funding? Versus we've got basically $50,000 on reserve right now for homeless shelters. So I'm wondering if that's something that we should pull out of the social service as part of the priority.
So I'm not sure if I fully understand your question. Just the context is, we went from 175 to 100K this year in the consolidated social service funding with the city of Urbana. And we've reserved, as we have for the last 2 years, set aside for emergency grants of $50,000 so that we don't necessarily have to come back and do a budget amendment if there's an emerging need. Certainly, whatever that need is would come to the town board, as we funded emergency shelter for men 2 winters ago. So I guess if I understand was your first question how you expect fee for service to go? And then the second question had to do with whether we should fold the $50,000, we should count it as social service funding?
Yeah, so perhaps my question wasn't clear, because you had mentioned to address emerging needs in the budget document, and had referenced the shelters. So right now, we also sometimes have, at least in the past, we've had shelters apply for social service funding. But it sounds to me like the $50,000 in grants is more than just homeless shelters, that you envision that. Okay, all right. So that was the second part of the question. But the first part of the question, in terms of fee for service, I mean, there's some things that are easy to do fee for service, and other things that aren't as easy. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so, and just on the second question, I think what I like about having a set aside, especially in the era of COVID, is we just don't know. So it was housing, but honestly, if you had asked me, Danielle, 2 weeks ago, if you had asked me 2 weeks ago, Danielle, do you think we're really going to go to year-round shelter? I have been in every meeting, and I would have said no. So I just can't predict, and so that's great. We don't know going forward what that's going to look like. Maybe it's food insecurity, maybe it's youth programming. It's really we're going to see what is really hitting our community. So in terms of fee for service, for this year, we're not converted. My understanding is we're not converting all of our grants to fee for service in the consolidated social service funding grant, our portion, because some things don't convert well to that. But I guess I have stated to the group, and we have attempted and started to move in that direction where we can go to fee for service. I feel like what I would like to see social service grants from the township do is to extend the services of the township to very low income residents of Urbana, which is that's our pool as township, and to do so in a way that is extremely quantifiable in terms of its impact for Urbana residents, right? And so that's a little bit of a dream. And we've been trying to figure out how do we, I would like the Bucket Brigade, for example. Honestly, it's wonderful to be able to say, and it's all angel donor funds now, so there's not social service funds, but I can tell you exactly how many buckets, who they went to, where they live, how many children. I know exactly who got what. And I can direct, you know what? We need masks now. Put masks in it. Hey, people are asking for soap. They don't have bleach. So I've been able to really direct what happens with the Bucket Brigade. And that is just, I feel, is a good model. It's like the ideal situation. If we were able to say, like, let's make sure that we have scholarships for these 200 children from Urbana schools to be able to access summer programs. We know, it's not amorphous and peppered across the community. So I'd really like us to, as you know, because I brought this up in our committee, let's really narrow our focus, because as the mayor can tell you, and I can tell you, money ain't grown on trees right now for the two agencies. So let's really focus on our people.
Yeah, so maybe we should have a broader conversation, just you and I. One of the things that I try and be cognizant of is that things like community healthcare, the healthcare consumers, there's no income test, right? I mean, anybody can go in and ask questions in terms of Medicaid, what they should choose, what are their healthcare options. And I think that that's a really important service for the city of Urbana, just broadly. Mm-hmm. So we have to think about both, this is a real unmet need in our community versus, well, you saw, 10% of your clientele fit into this extremely low. But as I said, we can have this conversation offline. Mm-hmm. I just kind of wanted to bring that up, that there are these larger kind of public service needs that are needed in our community that I would like to continue to be able to provide some resources.
Mm-hmm. And I would say the same thing about rape crisis and other things that are, so yes, exactly. I welcome that conversation. I think it's an important one to have.
Any other questions? Wayne?
Not a question, but I kind of wanted to go back to the IMRF question and talk about our contribution rates. In 2017, when Danielle first got elected, our employer contribution rate for IMRF was 12.92%. In 2018, it went up to 13.2%. 2019, it went down to 9.17%. Right now, today, it's 8.05%, and next year is projected to be 5.67%. That's a result of us paying down an unfunded liability. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Great. Okay, Dennis.
No.
Do you have a question? No? Any other questions?
I have one final question.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Absolutely.
So at the end of the day, we've been spending our surplus. So I was trying to figure out from this ordinance, what is left in our surplus at the end of fiscal year 2021, given this budget.
Yes. So if you look at the ordinance, which is on page 15,
yep,
you'll see essentially this is our estimate for our beginning balance because it's not the end of the month yet. So we did an estimate of expenditures. This is pretty close. So we expect at the end of this month, we'll have about 1.84 million across both funds. And as you'll see, more in GA than town fund, because historically there was that cutting of the rolls down to 26 clients. So there was a real increase in that surplus. So you can see our income and expenses. Income, we're under tax caps, but we have increased income through donations and through SSI reimbursements and interest. So those are important areas we've been able to grow. These expenses, as you can see, are pretty significant, especially in GA. Town fund is very close to balanced. It's not, it's not perfect, but it's pretty close. And with Wayne going down in one staff, next year we'll be balanced in town fund. General assistance is really where we have a major deficit that we're anticipating for this next year, over $500,000, which is, frightening to say the least. And as you'll see in the budget, it's, we have not gone up in terms of staff costs. I sent you a staff cost report several months ago. We really have gone up. We've gone up only slightly in that area. We really have gone up in terms of our assistance levels, and we added rental assistance, which frankly is one of the most important things that we've done in the last 2 years, in my opinion. So our total of expenses is almost $2 million for the year. So if you look, we're seeing the general assistance fund, which is really the area of greatest, going from about $1 million to about $650K. Again, healthy, not a terrible situation, but certainly we have to, this is the last year that we can do this. So we need to, in my opinion, we need to go to the voters and we need to ask them to restore that levy that was cut at a time when we had historic lows on the books, even though we did not have lows in terms of our poverty rate. And if the voters, which, I believe that the citizens of Urbana really understand and value Township, I think, I hope that we can make that case. And it's also completely up to the voters to decide whether or not that is where they want additional tax dollars to go. Now, this would be very modest tax increases. We're looking at, essentially a dinner out for a family in terms of an increase in a single year for a household. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation with you next after we get through this budget season. I'd certainly want to have it sooner rather than later. And I'm very open to your input in terms of how we approach that going forward. But I think the numbers are pretty clear in terms of what our future looks like. We will spend ourselves into nothing, and we'll have to cut rental assistance, cut social service funding, and cut GA with the fact that we are under tax caps and we lost levy, about almost $300,000 in levy a few years back.
So if I can state that back to you for just a moment, what I'm hearing you say is that this is like kind of the last year with no change in our levy, that we can maintain this this spending more than we're bringing in.
That's what I should have said. Well put, Mariana. That's right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Eric.
Yeah, that's clear, although we hope the situation won't be quite as dire when the economy recovers a bit. But that being said, I bet you've thought ahead to where in the election cycle you'd like that levy to be on the ballot. And
I have. I would be happy to have that conversation. I feel like we should take the levy conversation into an agenda item that we can discuss, and I can show you the data, what our options are. So I would welcome that conversation soon.
Okay.
We can schedule that in the next fiscal year.
Yeah, sounds great. I'm sure.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the budget.
That would be ordinance number T 2020-05-001. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Moved by Eric, seconded by Jared. Any further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Okay, I think I can talk now. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, Phyllis.
Welcome
Okay.
back.
Thank you. Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Colbert,
Yes.
Colebrook. Okay. Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
That motion
Mayor
passed.
Marlin.
Yes. Do I vote on
Okay,
this?
thank you.
No, I don't vote on this. That motion passes. Next up is resolution number T 2020-06-008R, which is a resolution authorizing the agreement with the County of Champaign for GIS services.
So this is our annual GIS agreement that we have to do every year. I know Fred made some changes. I'm not sure if they made it in. Kay, did they make them in? Or Wendy?
Yes, those changes were incorporated into the item.
So it should be good.
Talking about the correction?
The changes were incorporated into the item.
Correct.
She said they were. So I think it's good to go.
They were.
Okay. Any questions? Can we get a motion, please? Oh, Mary Alice?
Well, since you brought it up, Wayne, that there were changes, can you give us the cliff notes on what changes were made so we're aware?
Hey, give me a moment. Give me a moment. So it's changing the party from the Cunningham Township assessor to Cunningham Township was the essence of the changes.
So that was just done throughout the contract. That's the only change.
Yep.
Okay. All right. I'll make a motion. I can find the number. I move that resolution number T 2020-06-008R be approved.
I'll
Second.
That Sharice seconded?
Yes.
Okay. Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Sharice. Is there any further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes. And with no further business before the Cunningham Town Board, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
As soon as the clerk gives us the sign, we'll move on to our next meeting, which is a special meeting of the Urbana City Council.
Okay, I think we're ready.
I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Urbana City Council. It's Monday, June 15th, 2020. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Brown,
Here.
Mr. Colebrook,
Here.
Ms. Hersey,
Here.
Mr. Jacobson,
Here.
Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mr. Roberts,
Here.
Ms. Wu,
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here. Next up on the agenda is public input. Before we get started, I wanted to make a few announcements, and I noticed some of the input that has come in for this meeting actually had questions about some of the things we are about to get embarked on, so I wanted to bring people up to date. Just to let people know, the Community Engagement Coordinator position has been posted. If you go to our homepage, click on the employment button, it'll take you to the site where that job description and application materials are located. So I encourage anyone who's interested in that to do so. I wanted to let you and the public know that a special meeting of the Civilian Police Review Board is scheduled for next week on the 24th. And staff expects to bring some recommendations for procedural changes. And some of these reflect the comments and questions that we've been getting over the past few weeks. So I appreciate the input from the public in beginning the process of really improving the CPRB and its responsiveness, and that will continue. But again, the meeting is the 24th. We've set a date for the 10 Shared Principles Workshop, which is a joint project of the NAACP and the Chiefs Association. This is September 17th, and just a reminder, this is a structured workshop. It's run by the organization. It can handle 50 people. We'll be under phase 4, which is the limit for 50 people. And it's an invitation only. It includes members of the community and law enforcement. And we will be seeking a representative cross-section of the community. So we'll be very careful about trying to get as broad a representation as possible in this workshop. And then we're finalizing this week the scope of the proposal for the independent review of the Aaliyah Lewis arrest. We're reviewing the contract this week and hope to have the contract signed by the end of the week. And then once that's done, I can provide more information about a timeline, deliverables, and scope of the project. So a lot of progress has been made in the last week or so. So we'll move on to public input. Let me see. Does anyone wish to speak? We'll take verbal input first, and then we did receive some email. Okay, I don't see any hand raised. We'll move on to email input. We'll read these into the record, and then they will be incorporated into the meeting record. First is from...
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
I'm not sure participants are able to raise their hands. I'm getting some messages from folks who are in the chat trying to raise their hands and are unable to do so.
Okay.
So I don't know, Jason, if what we need to do to change that, but just FYI.
Thank you.
I'm working to find a fix now. I don't know if you want to begin with email as I look to find that fix.
Okay, I'll start with email. We'll go back to verbal. This is from Ben the Ark to the mayor and city council members of the city of Urbana. This comment is submitted by the Champaign-Urbana chapter of Ben the Ark Jewish Action. This evening, community members from Urbana and Champaign continue to line the sidewalk across the street from Urbana City Building and Urbana Police Department, speaking up against systemic racism, police violence, police murdering Black people. Our vision is racial and economic justice for people of color. We recognize this action is symbolic since the city council session is happening online, but we feel it's important to bring people together, to stand together, stand up for racial justice, not just across the United States, but right here in Urbana. Message from Ben the Ark CU is this: Now is the time to take bold action to dismantle systems of white supremacy that are endemic to our society. We're concerned and dismayed that victims of police brutality continue to be blamed for their own treatment at the hands of police who have extensive training to subdue people with violent, harmful, painful, deadly submission techniques, and yet seem to be so easily triggered into using excessive force. It's time to reprioritize the city's budget, put more money toward community-based solutions, mental health resources, sexual assault survivor resources, housing, food accessibility, and education, all outside the purview of policing. We look to build bridges in partnership to demand real change to racist mentalities that exist within law enforcement, public education, and the workforce in Champaign-Urbana. We look forward to a future where the health, safety, and well-being of Black and Brown people is prioritized, where white people listen, and where the seeds of racial and economic justice are sown and begin to grow. Next is from Marcy Adelson Schaefer. Dear Urbana City Council members, I'm standing with many people lining Vine Street in Urbana during your council meeting. This is to stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters of color that have been disrespected in the hands of Urbana PD. Many of us are here to end white silence. David Dorman. Although policing reform is not on the agenda tonight, I want to make a statement regarding this topic because changes to police practices are urgently needed in Urbana. I want the mayor and city council to stop making excuses for Urbana police when they use excessive force or use force inappropriately. Of course, more training and a different approach to policing are needed and should be implemented with careful planning, but police should be held to a higher standard by the mayor and city council members immediately. Set higher standards now, hold the police accountable to them now. The time for excuses and asking for more time is past. If the city of Urbana's contract with the FOP prevents the city council from setting the high standards and accountability the people are demanding, then opt out of the contract. Residents of Urbana demand action now. Lila Leopold, dear members of the City Council, I write as a Champaign-Urbana resident to renew my concern about the manner in which the present council is handling discussing the case of Miss Aaliyah Lewis with the public. I remain of a position that all charges against Miss Lewis should be dropped and the officers who beat Miss Lewis to be put on leave pending this investigation. That these charges remain at a time when it's been announced that her case is to be independently reviewed does not seem just. I write today most urgently to call for any details about the independent review of Miss Lewis's case, as the public has so far been left to weigh their judgment of the council's handling of this matter without any additional information other than that review supposedly exists. This seems anti-ethical to fostering an environment of trust and collegial communication between members of the council and the public. I really started to feel a bit hopeful once the third-party review investigation was announced that things here were moving in a good direction, but without any further information given in last week's meeting and what seemed like a selective reading of public input, I was left with an impending sense of dread about how the future of this community could play out. There are models across the country now for how to take urgent and meaningful action, and I feel here we are not yet seeing this at the level of our city governance. Please let us know what's going on. We're waiting. We'll have our ballots ready in November. Bronwyn Kane, dear council members, it's my understanding you are claiming that your hands are tied with regards to charges against Aaliyah Lewis. You state that Julia Reitz refuses to dismiss her case. If that's accurate, it still doesn't explain the decision to retain Chief Seraphin and the failure to address meaningfully the violence perpetrated that day and realistically many, many other days by the Urbana Police Department. Chief Seraphin made statements regarding the incident that were not accurate. How is this acceptable from someone in his position? The decision now made to retain him, apparently, I wonder what plans you have made to move forward in a way that will stop the UPD from traumatizing and abusing your citizens. I would ask that you listen to the community voices being raised by our local NAACP, make every effort to encourage the reform of the police department to NAACP Illinois standards. If the decision to drop charges is too far from your hands, what can you do to make it right with Miss Lewis? Can any of you see it in your heart to try to offer tangible support that might at least let this young woman know her community stands with her and regrets the events of that day? How are you going to fix this? Colleen Ramez, good afternoon. Recently, a job posting for a community engagement coordinator for the Urbana Police Department has been shared publicly and on social media. I urge you not to focus on such superficial measures, but instead focus on redirecting funds toward community-based programming that will help those in need. Most recently, the public's trust in the Urbana Police Department has been eroded by the mishandling of Aaliyah Lewis's situation. Charges against her should be dropped immediately. If nothing else, ask yourselves what is gained by continuing to prosecute her. Is there a perceived advantage or benefit to her continued prosecution? If so, it would behoove the counsel and prosecutor's office to explain that to the public. A desire to appear tough on crime is not enough. To the outside observer, it appears that the only basis for her charges resulted from escalation of a difficult situation by the officers. Moreover, the public has heard nothing regarding how the officers will be held accountable when they failed to use de-escalation techniques that I can only hope they've been trained in. The best way to restore public trust is by making a substantial and transparent change in the police department. The community engagement coordinator and online posts about baby deer are not going to do it. More could be gained by investing in community programming to meet needs that are unnecessarily resulting in difficult encounters with the police.
Mayor, the hand raising option is back up and working.
Okay,
so
I see that now. Thank you. I'm just going to finish. There's just a few more and then we'll go to the verbal input. This is from Andrea Black. I'm writing to ask that you reprioritize funds currently used for police force to instead be used for social services, for mental health resources, sexual assault survivor resources, mediation, housing, food accessibility, and education. It's from Julie Watkins. I'm replying to Mayor Marlin's comment after the truncated public input. She stated that certain procedures needed to be followed. Did you mean that by that the public trial? Chief Seraphin's presentation was in essence a trial with Aaliyah Lewis unable to defend herself, was something that was mandated to be done. If you want that procedure as something that needs to change, you spoke about changes. Why did you choose for it to be public, except you wanted it to be public with all the unfairness to Lewis that many have protested? Do you think it would have been better to be briefed privately? Why was it necessary to be public? The communications of Danielle Chenoweth, along with many other public input, have detailed the ways in which the presentation was inappropriate. I'm disappointed that the council as a whole has received a lot of public input and has been very evasive in responding. Kicking the can down the road to an outside investigation doesn't address the urgent need for the council to respond to public comment. Kai Shinbro, I imagine by now the council is tired of hearing public comments asking for police reform, sanctions against Chief Seraphin, charges against Aaliyah Lewis to be dropped. The truth is, either by your action or your inaction, you've made your stances on these subjects clear already, and we, the public, don't seem to get it. And you're right, we don't get it. We don't understand why the council is defending Chief Seraphin when public confidence in his ability to lead a just department is low. We don't understand why there's been no movement by your city's council to reform the police budget amid national, state, and local outcry against bloated, militarized police departments. We don't understand why the council cannot make any proposals to divert some money away from policing and put it towards hiring more social workers, bettering K-12 education, bettering public housing, improving other community services. We don't understand why Officer Ruff cannot be put on leave without pay after the racially motivated arrest of Aaliyah Lewis. I'm sure an investigation will find that her arrest was not racially motivated. But the truth we all know is that if she were white, she would not have been arrested, not in the same way. We don't understand these points. If time allows, I'd like to hear clarification. Allison Cesar, as a UIUC graduate student and concerned citizen, I call on the City Council to consider a significant and immediate decrease in police funding. Police nationwide continue to terrorize communities, especially Black communities, and to commit extrajudicial murders with impunity. This month, CU Police Department used tear gas, which is banned in theaters of war by the Geneva Protocol and the UN Chemical Weapons Convention, against young people who were exercising their First Amendment rights to free speech and peaceful protest. We are in the middle of a respiratory pandemic, and our police department chose to use a chemical agent that targets the lungs against community members. The CU Police Department is dangerous to our community. I call on the City Council to do what's best for all of your health and reinvest police funding in education, Black and brown communities, restorative justice, and COVID-19 relief. Rachel Kaufman. My name is Rachel Kaufman. I'm a resident of Urbana. I'm extremely concerned with the City of Urbana's investment in police department as a means of keeping our community safe and healthy. I'm therefore writing to demand that the City Council vote to reapportion funds currently allocated to the police department to instead support programs that promote the well-being of our citizens, hold each other accountable, and keeping our community safe. It is morally reprehensible to dedicate so many resources to police while citizens struggle to afford basic necessities and many more lack of access to essential services. We could be taking better care of our community by education on trauma resiliency, supporting local housing and justice accessibility efforts, and establishing mutual aid services. Through appropriate fund allocation away from the police and into community services, we can build a stronger and healthier place to live. I implore you to listen to the needs of your constituents and take immediate action to address our concerns. We can say Black Lives Matter all we want, but as a community, we must show that Black Lives Matter, and as a society currently burdened by capitalism, we must spend like Black Lives Matter. Ron Kester. Dear Mayor and Urbana City Council, I was discouraged by last Wednesday's discussion about Chief Seraphin's reappointment. Instead of an evidence-based conversation about job performance and the role of police leadership, the council engaged in casual conversation based on generalizations and anecdotes. How easy it is to talk to the police chief is volunteer efforts outside the workplace. In fact, the only attempt by any council member to introduce evidence about job performance to inform their vote came from Eric Jacobson, who claimed that as a result of police leadership, Seraphin made the racial disparities in traffic stops go away. That would indeed be a remarkable achievement if it were true. According to Urbana Police Department criminal statistician Melissa Hendrian, the disproportionate percentage of police traffic stops of Black residents in Urbana is at an all-time high under Seraphin's leadership. In addition, UPD's racial disparity in pedestrian stops is one of the worst in the state. Do the members of the Urbana City Council know anything about Chief Seraphin's job performance? Perhaps the question is more basic than that. Do the members of the Urbana City Council have any evidence-based criteria for determining the difference between good and poor job performances by the chief of police? This is a crisis of police accountability in our city. Drop the charges against Aaliyah Lewis, reform the CPRB, review the use of force policy. We need a conversation about what effective political oversight of the police looks like and how evidence informs our policies decisions. Amy Williams, it's time to reevaluate the role and scope of law enforcement. The Urbana City Council has been grappling with the local incidents of police brutality for months and now is seeing this issue play out on the national stage. The conversation needs to move beyond civilian police review boards. It's time for meaningful change. There's a desperate need for more affordable housing and increase in school social workers in Urbana. Imagine if the funds currently spent on UPD could be redistributed to support projects that increase quality of life for Urbana community members. Minneapolis is sending a strong message that it cares about its community by disbanding its police department and replacing it with community-led safety model. It's time for Urbana to follow the same. Amy Keener, I'm writing to ask the Urbana City Council to not only strengthen the Urbana Civilian Police Review Board, follow the example of cities around the U.S., from San Francisco to Minneapolis to New York, to redirect funding from the police to more community-based efforts, including mental health resources, sexual assault survivor resources, mediation, housing, food accessibility, and education. It's concerning that the police should be expected to respond to issues that would be better served through other residents. And the last written is, I want to thank council members Wu, Roberts, Miller, Brown, and Hersey for raising numerous questions and concerns at the Urbana City Council meeting of June 10th related to the budget. I believe I would be speaking for a majority of Urbana residents when I say I feel dismayed and disheartened to see, and this is from Sarah Nixon. I would feel dismayed and disheartened to see in the budget, which appears to be more than $11 million operating budget for the Urbana Police Department, alongside figures like no more than $73,160 allotted for social services and $32,000 for public arts. I noted too with disbelief that public arts salaries and benefits was apportioned a minuscule $5,177 last year, and this fiscal year will be asked to manage on a miracle shoestring budget of only $1,291. I would point out those figures are not accurate. We'll be going over the budget next week. Maybe if we had better arts funding and young entrepreneurship opportunities for at-use youth and young adults like Aaliyah Lewis and Kamarian Busby, for example, they could develop some healthier ways and choices for expressing frustrations and channeling anxieties. Committed funding for community entrepreneurship and creative initiatives, from science and digital technologies to music and video art, documentary making, dance and cooking are some of the ways the city could continue to enrich Urbana as a whole while strengthening specific community cultures. Facilitating professional opportunities, nurturing talent and self-esteem among kids who might otherwise miss opportunities the more privileged among us take for granted. Salt and Light on Philo Road has beautiful and spacious, largely still empty facilities for community projects and programs. And I know from having volunteered there, they are in desperate need of funding moving forward, struggling to survive, especially during this time of COVID, and to offer services like free computer lab, childcare, and other hoped for community programs that I believe are now on hold. My point is that South Urbana critically needs a piece of the budget pie for an innovative community arts and business incubation center. And though it wouldn't have to be at Salt and Light, their building comes to mind only because it seems like it would be an ideal place to attempt such a project. And perhaps the empty half of the building could be repurposed as a headquarter for developing innovative social services, first responders partnership program with the UPD of the kind alluded to by Council members Brown and Miller last week. Is there a way to combine community wellness with newly envisioned community policing partnerships? I don't know what it would look like, but I'm just brainstorming here. And I'll bet, no, I know for a fact that the U of I is also interested in helping support community wellness ventures. In fact, one of my mentors at the Health Maker Lab, Dr. Ruby Mendenhall, has been spearheading proposals for a community think and do tank wellness center at Lincoln Square Mall. I'll copy Ruby here just in case city leadership might be interested in connecting and talking with her. In closing, as the City Council moves toward a vote on the budget on June 22nd, I and so many other residents look forward to a continued collective effort to seriously review and revise fiscal allocations so they can become more in line with the stated commitment to invest in actual community needs. And that's all I have for email input. We'll go to verbal input. See where we are. Danielle Chenoweth.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Danielle Chenoweth. I live at 412 West Illinois Street in Urbana and have since been in Urbana since 1995. Right now, there's a vigil outside City Hall calling for an end to white silence on the killing and brutalization of Black and Brown residents, both nationwide and here at home. I just want to make that clear, since usually you would be in the building and be aware of this. I have been working personally on issues of police and criminal justice reform since, with Carol and Aaron Emmons, we founded CU Citizens for Peace and Justice in 2004. Of all the things I have worked on, bike paths and public arts and ecological construction, making change in policy, policing and jail practices has been the hardest nut to crack. There is still no justice for Kewan Carrington, shot by Champaign Police Chief, Amber Grohol, raped by Officer Yort, Greg Brown, strangled by Champaign Police, Myron Scruggs, his eye socket broken by Officer Rush, or Aaliyah Lewis, brutalized by Urbana Police on April 10th. I can name dozens more and will. Let's talk about racial profiling, because that is at the heart of the April 10th incident. If you listen to the audio, a review of the tape shows that Ms. Lewis listed what she saw as racial profiling. So what was she upset about? In 2004, when Senator Obama mandated racial traffic stop data, African Americans composed 35% of all traffic stops in Urbana. 16 years later, they composed 34%, with a recent uptick. African Americans compose a whopping 66%, or 2/3 of Urbana's pedestrian stops. They are only 13% of the population. So it's important, if you could please walk in her shoes and think you did not see what happened before that incident, but what happened was repeated incidents of racial profiling and a level of frustration that bubbled over in that moment. When officers acted in the manner they did on April 10th, it's the responsibility of leadership to take swift action to course correct and reestablish public trust. A review of the body camera footage of April 10th arrest shows many missed opportunities for de-escalation, incompetence in dealing with an agitated residents, and reckless, disrespectful, and retaliatory actions by our police officers. Racism and sexism are central to understanding this event. Such brutality would not have been inflicted on Ms. Lewis if she were white. The victim complains she is being racially profiled. She offers herself to be searched by a female officer only while she is on the ground spread eagle. And she is assaulted in response to calling the police racist and is told her during her beating, "You're not acting like a lady." These were all shown to us on April 27th while we were being told, gaslit, that this was appropriate behavior by the police. What I expected after the Good Friday debacle is for city leadership to do the right thing. Let me be clear. That would have looked like putting the officers involved on administrative leave immediately, conducting a meaningful investigation, explaining to the state's attorney that officers improperly instigated a physical confrontation, making an apology and restitution to the victim, and taking action to ensure it did not happen again. Here are a few specific things I would like to ask council members to do. Right now, it's very important that you vote to ensure that the police department is not allowed to delete body camera footage. It is important that you have access. I believe there's a limit on when it is deleted. You have to make sure that you have the alleged footage of the police approaching the man who videotaped the beating and they asked him to take it down. You must ensure that when officers act outside of department policy, the procedure, they are held accountable and disciplined. The record of complaints filed against an officer should be public information. You should set a goal to bring traffic stop in line with community demographics. Do stops equitably across the city and deal with the pressure to do consent searches. Get rid of them. Review the review police use of force policy and eliminate use of force tactics like chokeholds, knee to the neck, punching to the head, or any force that potentially kills people. You should fix the broken CPRB. One of the things you, the council, can do is ask the city administrator right now to send you copies of all the complaints that were submitted but never heard. You should look at them. You should see them. You can you should vote to put rough on investigative leave. You can do that. You can put it on the agenda with 2 people making the motion. You can ask the state's attorney to drop the charges. You can speak to her about the issue. I did that with Officer Ewart. I called the special prosecutor while I was on city council. There is precedent. You can release the name of the investigating firm and scope of work to the public so we have public input on it. And as the county did years ago, you can create a racial justice task force, pulling representation from the many intelligent people, including impacted families who have come and spoken to you, and empower them to bring forward recommendations for change. Thank you so much.
Maya Goulard, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. I forgot to say that before.
Hello, everyone. Maya Goulard. I am a lifelong Doctor Who fan, and although I enjoy the science fiction stuff, some of my favorite episodes are when they travel to the big moments in history. Hundreds of years from now, 2020 will be one of those moments. I have a few questions that I'd like you to think about. First, why did you run for office? My whole life, I've equated running for political office with wanting to work for change. I believe that the positions you hold now are supposed to bring the positive changes needed. You are so proud to have balanced the budget. Now let's look past the money and at the heart, look deeper. After last week's meeting, I was sick with despondency. I expected to be disappointed at the federal level, but I never thought I would be confronted by lack of awareness and apathy from my government here in Urbana. So too, if you believe you are supposed to work for positive change, what kind of change is needed? Look at the world. In all 50 states, there are marches calling to defund the police. NASCAR, of all things, has forbidden the Confederate flag at their races. Confederate monuments that have stood for hundreds of years are being removed by both governments and by people. While we do not have Confederate monuments locally, we do have the history that continues to this day of racial inequality. Now is not the time to discuss for discussions on what specifically defines excessive force. Now is not the time to approve a budget where 1/3 of our city's money goes to the same old police force. It is time to talk about, is it time to talk about updating phones in the city building? No. Read the room. It is time to address systemic racism. It is time for real change. It is time to look at how we spend our money and how that can change to address the systemic racism in our community. So what will you do? I ask that you start by talking about this, not just when confronted about it. In your meetings, say loud and often on the record something like Black Lives Matter just as much as everyone else's. We know the history of slavery, Jim Crow, Black Wall Street, the hate groups. We have seen the videos of brutality, and because we have a heart, we have cried. We will do all we can to bring about the changes we can at a local level. Then I ask that you plan, meet with local groups, talk with Black Lives Matter leaders, make committees if you must, but move forward. And finally, and most importantly, you must act. Prove you are listening to the local community and to the country at large. Drop the charges against Aaliyah Lewis, immediately scrap the current civilian review board and start over so that community members have less red tape to request a review, and it must not have to be approved by police first. Make changes to our budget by defunding the police, changes to our policing policies by holding them accountable for all force used, and changes to your attitudes to see why so many in our community see the police as something to fear. I was raised in this community. I have raised 4 children in this community. This is my home, and I'm tired of seeing my neighbors mistreated by those who are supposed to protect them. Do something. It is literally your job.
Thank you. Tracy Chong.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Tracy Chong, resident of Urbana. City Council, week after week, you have heard the voices and pleas from residents asking for accountability and transparency. Instead of improving, here are some examples of how you have responded. At last week's City Council meeting, Mayor Marlin ended public input early, even though there were more than 25 minutes, even though there were 25 more minutes allocated to read letters from the public. Mayor Marlin cherry-picked through the letters, the majority of which were in opposition to the reappointment of Urbana Police Chief Brian Serafin, and instead chooses to read a letter from retired Urbana Police Officer Preston James. Preston's letter was full of praise for his ex-colleague Serafin. This is not surprising. During his tenure as support staff for the CPRB, Preston demonstrated his allegiance to the police by lying about police misconduct findings and withholding information from the public and board members. Mayor Marlin also contradicts herself, declining to read non-local input but reading Preston's letter. Preston now lives in Kansas. This is why our city government is corrupt. Friends and colleagues protecting and supporting each other to maintain the status quo. Urbana is resorting to even more drastic measures to withhold public documents from residents. The city and UPD have improperly delayed FOIA responses, withheld records, and outright ignored requests. Today, I received a response to my FOIA request asking for documents related to the Aaliyah Lewis case, the city's compliance with the Open Meetings Act, and the citizen police complaint process. Kay Mihari from the city clerk's office wanted me to pay $88 for the documents. In the invoice, the city was charging me $20 for 0.18 megabytes for a PDF of the CPRB complaint registry. I was also informed by Kurt Borman that some body camera footage related to the Lewis incident has not been flagged and will be deleted in less than 4 weeks. It is just appalling that the city is now erecting this giant hurdle to withhold documents when they don't have an exemption they can invoke. Eric Jacobson. On June 3rd, you supported the CPRB's decision to violate ordinance and stop reviewing taser displays. You said nobody ever got hurt by looking at a taser gun. There are many reasons one could use to debate the pros and cons of reviewing taser displays, but this is not one of them. By your logic, is it okay if I point a gun at your face? Would it do no harm if I point a gun at your wife's face? After all, nobody ever got hurt by just looking at a gun, right? Your comments reflect how out of touch you are regarding police violence. Mayor Marlin, if this is how you lead the government and city staff, it is no wonder the city of Urbana is as corrupt as it is right now. I don't think you are fit to lead this city, and you should resign. Lastly, I would like to voice my appreciation for Councilmember Jared Miller's honest and transparent comments during the last meeting. The rest of you saw the same violations and dishonesty displayed by Mayor Marlin, but did not speak up, making you complicit.
Thank you. Christopher?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hi. My name is Christopher Hansen. I've been living in Urbana for 18 years. I've been working on police misconduct for several years now, and in my opinion, things have actually just gotten much worse over the past 2 months. There seems to be no end to the lies and obfuscation that are being put forth by Mayor Marlin and her staff. Last week, Marlin violated the public input rules just to try to twist the conversation on the reappointment of Chief Seraphin. And Jared Miller was the only person in the meeting who had the integrity to point out that Marlin was in violation. Everyone else on the council just let it happen. And that makes the rest of you complicit. And I wonder what you think of yourselves just watching the mayor violate public input rules and saying nothing. It's amazing. Urbana now has their legal staff on full barricade mode and on public records requests, especially when it comes to records related to police misconduct. They're trying to shut everything down. Kay Meharry just told me I need to pay $100 for one dash cam video, and she refused to give me body cam video in which I personally appear, which is entirely illegal. The body camera law is very clear about this. One of my recent requests also included documents related to the Alea Lewis arrest, and the city of Urbana wants me to pay $168 for those records. I don't know who Kurt Borman, our new FOIA officer, is, or Kay Meharry are, but I think Urbana could solve its financial problems and begin to cure corruption at the same time by simply getting rid of these people. Their primary job description seems to be to act contrary to the interests of the public and prevent residents from having access to their own government. I just spoke to Carol Mitten on the phone about 4 hours ago, and she tells me that city staff are still refusing to accept police complaints that aren't notarized, even though there's no such requirement in the CPRB ordinance. Even after months of public input and hundreds of people arguing that the police complaint process is broken and a nationwide movement, we in Urbana can't even get past the most meaningless and obviously invented barriers. These city staff members who think it's their job to protect their friends instead of serving the public, they can find work elsewhere. Urbana does not need or want these people employed with the city. I am glad to hear that we finally have a CPRB meeting scheduled for next week. It's been far too long. I see that it still hasn't been added to the city calendar, so I think someone should get information about that up immediately with an agenda so the public knows what is going on. Just as a reminder, the public has been giving recommendations and input on the CPRB for 2 months. You probably have about 20 hours of recommendations from the public to get through. My impression of the CPRB members is that they have very good intentions and most of them are very pleasant people, but no one on that board has demonstrated the competence and enthusiasm needed to move the CPRB into a useful or meaningful state. So I'm wondering how the council expects that we're supposed to make any progress here. I would also like to hear today at this meeting some of the specific changes that council members want to see with the CPRB and elsewhere to place some sense of accountability on our police officers. Let's hear specifics right now today. Let's stop pushing it off. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Thanks.
Megan?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, my statement is going to take about 4 minutes. If I don't finish, I'll just say it in the next meeting. Dear Mayor Marlin and the rest of the City Council, my name is Megan and I live in Ward 5 in Urbana, and I've been a CU resident for almost a decade. I had a different statement prepared for today, but I believe my fellow community members have it covered. I hope you will truly hear us. I want to take the time today instead to talk about 2 recent examples of why the police need to be defunded and why they are grossly ineffective to date. These examples happened less than 24 hours ago and reflect this problem in a micro and macro way. Around 6:30 p.m. yesterday, my partner and I were riding our bikes down Main Street when we saw some older women crowded around a spot on the ground, cooing and taking pictures with their phone. It was right outside the parking garage in Crane Alley, a very high-trafficked area. We stopped to see what it was all about and realized it was a family of ducks, a mother duck and her 7 ducklings. The women trying to herd them were not confident or successful in their efforts. The mother duck felt terrified and quacked and flew away multiple times, but came back just as much crying for her babies that these women had put in a box. Eventually, the women put the box of ducklings down and left. They didn't know what to do. Apparently, the cops had already been there and quote-unquote rescued the ducks from the storm drain. My partner and I were the ones who actually took the 30 minutes to actually save them, escorting these ducks through traffic, parking lots, and drunk civilians. We finally get them to Boneyard Creek when 3 of the ducklings fall into a crack in between concrete blocks. If we hadn't been there to pull them out, they would have died. To end that story quickly, the cops showed up for a job they were not qualified for, posed for photos with the ducklings, posted this photo on their Facebook with the caption, "Another life-saving event for the UPD," end quote, that now has over 500 Facebook likes. The police didn't save them. Again, they showed up for a job they weren't qualified for, posed for a photo, posted that photo with some misleading caption, and then left the ducks in a bush next to a parking garage in one of the busiest streets in Urbana. The cops can literally stop traffic. They couldn't take the time to walk these ducks? They felt the need to lie with an exaggerated statement about something that in the schemes of things is so small. Imagine what else they do, what they lie about, and what people they don't save when no one's looking. Another more serious example, last night after being home for less than 20 minutes after the duck saving mission, we went to take the trash out and heard our neighbor asking someone, "You all right, man?" We couldn't see who it was until we walked closer and saw an old black man lying crumpled on the dark, unlit pavement. We got him up, for he was frail and had bad knees. We all unanimously and immediately chose not to call the cops and cleaned his injuries up and took him back to his apartment in Champaign ourselves. I won't go into too many details for the sake of this man's privacy, but he was confiding in us about his recent divorce and his son dying, sounding depressed. We knew the cops wouldn't be helpful. At the very least, they'd make it worse by their historically proven violent presence. At the most, they'd incarcerate the 60-year-old man for slurring his speech, and that all could end up in his death. The police, without a doubt, would have showed up and in some way taken the peace, freedom, and or life of this man. So we knew not to call. I have had some of the most human experiences of my life in the last few weeks, working with community members to help real people affected by racism, police brutality, and abuse. I'm sorry you can't say the same. I hope you'll listen to our demands of defunding the police and that you and the Chief Seraphin show up to the special council meeting on June 24th. It will be very telling if you don't. Also, to Eric Jacobson, I don't give a single hoot if racial disparity in traffic stops has gone down, which it hasn't. I care about the young black man pedestrian on my street who had a gun pulled on him and literally 10 cop cars drive up not 2 minutes later. 10 cop cars! Simply for matching a description. I want to know the racial disparities in arrests, in bond prices set, in city governing boards and jobs, in school officials, and I want you to personally email me what you think of those last things mentioned and tell me why that is. I'll send you the video of the young black man on my street who was harassed and traumatized by this police force you're all apparently so proud of. The system doesn't work, the courts don't work for us, the police don't work for us. To them, citizens exist for them to terrorize, arrest, bill, and by their own name, police. Police are incentivized to make arrests, exaggerate charges, and the courts and councils like you help carry out these crimes, because that's what they are. People that allow the most vulnerable to be further traumatized are criminals, and if anything was fair, you would be disempowered and removed from your office for upholding this police force and jail system that deserves the same. Either embrace this movement or go down with your ship. We will keep showing up. And please disclose what company was hired to do the independent investigation in the Leah Lewis case. Thank you.
Austin Hoffman.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. You have 3 minutes, please.
Hi, I'm Austin Hoffman. I'm a resident of Urbana. Instead of sending my comments via email this evening, I decided to speak to ensure that I'm heard. Since last week, Mayor Marlin chose to silence many of us by only using about 90 minutes of the allotted 2 hours for public input. I'm speaking today to ask the City Council to provide more information about the independent investigation regarding the arrest of Miss Aaliyah Lewis and to do all that it can to ensure that the charges against her are dropped. I also want to express my disappointment in all of you, with the exception of Alderman Miller, for voting to reappoint Police Chief Brian Serafin. Last week, Mayor Marlin repeatedly assured us that if we simply knew Chief Serafin personally, we would realize that he was, quote, one of the good ones. Saying this perpetuates the false distinction between supposedly good police and bad police, rather than challenging the increasingly dubious assumption that policing keeps us safe in the first place. In saying this, you have fundamentally misunderstood the grievance. This is not really about Chief Serafin. I could frankly care less about his personal character or personal politics. Because if the good ones, as you say, could help reform the police, they would have done so by now. If more implicit bias training, more funding, more body cameras, and more coffee with a cop sessions could stop them from killing people, it would have happened by now. Statistically speaking, these reforms have done little to nothing to stop police from murdering, brutalizing, and swelling the largest prison population on the face of the planet. If any of you were present for the amazing protests organized last weekend by Pain to Peace, you may have heard a call and response chant that erupted periodically throughout the crowd, which was, "No bad apples, cut that tree." This 6-word chant encapsulates a more accurate understanding of American policing than that espoused by this council. It really doesn't matter whether Chief Serafin is one of the good ones or not. Regardless of his character or personal politics, again, he is a cog in a system of violence and oppression. When you buy into this facile bad apples discourse, you conveniently omit the fact that a bad apple can spoil the whole bunch. So what can you do instead? You should withhold pensions and fire any cops who have used excessive force, which would be all the officers involved in Ms. Lewis's arrest. If the city's contract with the FOP prevents you from doing so, you should opt out of or terminate that contract. You could make the police liable for misconduct settlements and not our city and our taxpayers. You could immediately cease Urbana PD's involvement in police militarization programs such as the 1033 program. And most importantly, as others during this session have suggested, you should defund the police and redirect this money towards things that actually keep our citizens safe and our communities healthy and thriving. In sum, you should be less concerned about cutting down the trees on Green Street and focus on uprooting the festering and toxic orchard of state violence that is growing out of control inside the Urbana City building and inside your heads. Thank you.
Lena?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Lena Walker. I'm a graduate student and a worker at UIUC. Like many who have spoken at these meetings, I am appalled by the Urbana Police Department's violent and unconscionable assault of Aaliyah Lewis on April 10th, and cannot understand how the ongoing charges against her can be considered just by any measure. Charges against Ms. Lewis must be dropped, and the officers who brutalized her should be taken off duty pending the completion of an independent investigation of her arrest. Furthermore, there should be clear communication and transparency between the council and the community about who is being tasked with this investigation and what the results are. Mayor Marlin's handling of public input at last week's meeting demonstrated how little regard this council seems to have for community input. We can't even trust the city council to follow proper protocol to hear public comment, and you expect us to trust the police with deadly force. We do not exist in an historical vacuum. Last year, this community marked 10 years since the death of Quan Carrington, a 15-year-old child who was murdered by police. And in spite of all the touted changes, we are still seeing violence committed against Black community members by law enforcement who are largely shielded from accountability. We live in a nation that was founded on white supremacist ideology, and we continue to nurture that hideous ideology through our unwillingness to demand justice for people of color, to pursue personal comfort, safety, and wealth in exchange for turning a blind eye to systemic racism and oppression. I urge the City Council to not harden their hearts against the voices they are hearing at these meetings, to not close their ears and resolve to ignore people until they grow tired of inaction and things, quote unquote, go back to normal. What is normal? A society in which police are allowed to harass, intimidate, brutalize, and murder people of color with impunity? A community in which a young woman can be brutalized in the street and nothing is done to hold the perpetrators of this violence accountable? Black Lives Matter. It is not enough to promise to do better. Address the violence that has already occurred and take actual steps to ensure that it does not continue. Thank you.
Amy Gray for Graph.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. City Council, my name is Amy Graff and I have been a resident of Champaign and Urbana for 11 years. I'd like to start off by expressing how utterly disappointed I am in the reappointment of Chief Seraphin. You offered us no evidence-based recommendations. In fact, Mayor Marlin, you spent time lecturing your constituents about your personal relationship with Seraphin and how you felt he was one of the good ones. Of course you two have a good relationship. You both benefit from that relationship. All of the decisions on his reappointment were based on the opinions of you and council. You were not appointed for your personal opinions. You were appointed to represent your constituents with fact-based research and evidence to back you up. Instead, you ignore your citizens and serve yourself and those who directly benefit you based off of your feelings. You ask us to trust you and the police department to hold themselves accountable, but you continually show us that you are not capable of that. The Civilian Police Review Board has been an absolute failure, and through its design, it is meant to fail. After a traumatic encounter with the police, citizens have 45 days from the incident to file a complaint, which then goes to the mayor and the police chief to review. Citizens are not allowed anonymity in this process either. Anyone would feel intimidated to go up against an institution with that much power and resources against them. The police chief and the mayor are not unbiased parties in this. And through these meetings, Mayor Marlin has done an exemplary job showing that she trusts the word of police more than the word of her constituents. How can citizens trust that justice will be served and officers will be held accountable for their actions when the people who review misconduct are the mayor and the police chief? I write today begging you, stop funneling our taxpayer dollars into the police. As a citizen, I do not want or feel any semblance of a need for a community engagement coordinator that will cost a yearly salary of $50,000 to $60,000. Mayor Marlin, stop forcing the taxpayers to pay for a police PR person to, quote, increase the number of positive contacts between police officers and the community to dispel preconceived notions and forge new relationships. To me, this sounds like one-directional outreach designed to sway the public's view on police, not the other way around. I want my tax money to be used for community evidence-based programs to address problems at their root. I do not want our community money used to skew the narrative when you could put that money to much better use. If you are actually committed to serving your people and improving community relationships, start by dropping the charges against Aaliyah Lewis and fire the cops involved in her case. Stop funding the police and start reallocating those funds to our school district and Cunningham Township. Thank you.
Concerned citizen?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Alana Ackerman. I'm a graduate student at UIUC as well as a resident of Urbana. I'm writing or speaking to demand that all charges be dropped against Aaliyah Lewis and that the officers who beat Miss Lewis be put on leave, fired, and that an independent investigation also be conducted. I'm also speaking with concern regarding comments that Mayor Marlin has previously made, referring to Chief Seraphin as, I quote, one of the good ones. Mayor Marlin, the residents of Urbana are not rising up in response to Chief Seraphin's personal qualities or attributes. We are rising up so that those in positions of power are held responsible and accountable for the violence and brutality of those they oversee. How much you like Chief Seraphin and think he is a, quote, good person is completely beside the point and shows how out of touch you are with the people you supposedly represent. I and many others like me are calling for the abolition of the police. Abolition is a project that you can support right now. It means reorienting our priorities as a society. It means defunding the police, an institution with roots in the social control and punishment of Black people. It also means reinvesting in the social structures and systems that actually make people and communities safer. Abolition means investing in Black life. It means investing in transformative justice, in mental health teams and experts who can actually assist people in times of crisis. Mayor Marlin has previously mentioned the annual number of 911 calls as proof that the police need to be adequately funded. Mayor Marlin, This number demonstrates the amount of social aid and assistance that people need, not the amount of armed responders with guns who act with brutality and impunity. The brutality we saw enacted against Ms. Lewis is exactly why we need to abolish the police and replace this racist system by reorienting how we think about social safety and care. I urge everyone on the City Council to educate themselves about what abolishing the police actually means. It's not a dream, it's not a utopia, it's what we are demanding right now for a safer and more equitable society. Free Aaliyah Lewis, drop all charges, abolish the police, fire Chief Serafin, and Mayor Marlin resign.
Okay. Sarah Nixon has your hand up, but you've already submitted public input via email. So you can speak once or submit input once during a meeting. So I don't see any more hands raised, and we will move on to the first item of business, which is resolution number 2020-06-062R, resolution of protest against a proposed text amendment to the Champaign County zoning ordinance related to CCZBA 973 AT20, adult use cannabis regulation.
Marcus Ritchie will be giving the presentation. He is here, so let's just give him another second, if you don't mind. Perhaps he's having difficulty.
Marcus, I have unmuted you. You should be able to talk.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. So you all have the memo to City Council in front of you, so I will summarize the highlights of it. The proposed text amendment from the Champaign County Zoning Administrator, John Hall, who should be in attendance tonight and available to answer questions, is very similar to the cannabis zoning text amendment recently passed by the city in October. It permits the same 6 adult cannabis uses. It incorporates similar distance buffer requirements between similar cannabis uses and also between schools as required by state law, and it would permit similar cannabis uses in similar geographic locations that the city would allow those same uses. Last Thursday, the Urbana Plan Commission voted 6-0 to forward a recommendation to City Council to defeat a resolution of protest against the proposed amendment. City staff have determined that the proposed text amendment would not directly affect the use of land within the city and do not anticipate that it would affect the city's ability to manage growth and development in the city or its extraterritorial jurisdiction. I would like to share a slide if I could. And let me bring that up. And in summary, City Council has these options in CCZBA case 973 AT20. If City Council does not want to protest the proposed amendment, the appropriate action would be to move for a resolution of protest and then defeat the resolution of protest. And if City Council wants to protest the proposed amendment, the appropriate action would be to move for a resolution of protest and then approve the resolution of protest.
Thank you, Marcus. Any questions? Bill?
So the cultivation centers, it looked like the craft growers wouldn't be that much different than our current ordinance, but the cultivation centers would be able to be basically abut residential areas, wouldn't they?
If, and I will defer for any details to Mr. Hall, I believe that if they are within 350 feet, 300 feet of a residential district, then that would require a special use permit from the county board. And that special use permit would trigger a notification from the county to the city that a special use permit application has been received. This would then give the city an opportunity to provide comments to the county board.
Does that notification usually just go to you guys in planning, or I don't remember ever seeing one on the city council.
I do not know who else it goes to, but it does come to the planning division. I know I'm receiving copies of those as well. It might be that additional copies come to other people further up in community development.
If a cultivation center wanted to go in right next to a residential area and they didn't need to hook up to the sanitary sewer, would they still need to annex to the city if they were adjacent to city boundaries?
As I understand the annexation agreement with the Urbana-Champaign Sanitary District, if a new or expanded use was proposed on a site, that would be considered a new tap into the sanitary network, and that would then trigger the need for an annexation agreement. I will also defer to Lori Pearson as well for any clarification on that.
That's also my understanding. And if it is a large facility where they might have employees, let's say, they would probably have to put in a bathroom per Illinois plumbing code. So while there might be some instances where I guess it's possible a cultivation center could go in and they wouldn't trigger the requirements for an annexation agreement, I think it would likely be rare.
Okay. That's all I have for now. Thanks.
Dennis?
Dennis, you need to unmute, please.
Yeah, sorry. I had an idea about a question about the craft growers in that pamphlet that was sent to us concerning this proposal. And it talks about it, how it compares to the city zoning, that the amendment would permit craft growers in areas that are adjacent to city land that requires a city SUP as either by right use or with a county near Cunningham Avenue and Olympian Drive and along High Cross and Windsor Road. Then it says craft growers would also be permitted in some areas adjacent to the city land that would not be permitted, that would not permit them at all, and that would be east of Stone Creek and around Myra Ridge subdivision. So I guess I'm concerned a little bit about the extent that a craft grower might be located right next to one of our more high-ended subdivision developments in the community and down at Myra Ridge. And I know that the land east of it is not really developed in any way and has been vacant for quite some time. But I'm just curious about whether it's really advisable to allow that without any possibility of review.
So referring back to the memo, for craft growers, it goes on to say the requirement for a county special use permit would mean that the city would be notified and could submit comments to the county board regarding the proposed special use permit. So if it's within that 300-foot buffer distance of a residentially zoned district, it would require not only a special use permit from Champaign County, but a county board approved special use permit.
So there would be review.
Yes, there would. Now,
And
again,
we should also point out that there is a requirement, and perhaps John Hall can remind me of the requirement for county special use permits in terms of notification radius. Can you enlighten us on that, John?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We send notification when it's within an ETJ area to the Community Development Department, the city clerk, and to any landowner within 250 feet of the subject property. Now, if the subject property is a small part of a larger parcel, we go around the larger parcel. So I hope that's helpful.
Perhaps it is, although 250 feet doesn't take you very close to most homes in either Myra Ridge or Stone Creek, so I'm kind of concerned about that. I mean, probably you'd be able to get across the street, across High Cross Road, and not very much closer into the neighborhood that I'm concerned about, so I just was wondering.
Mary Alice?
So based on what the county just said, that the special use permit would be sent to the planning department. Does that mean that it does not come to city council for comment?
There is not a, you don't have protest ability for a county special use permit. So if it's something that you identify as something that you wanted to be notified about, we could certainly do that. Typically what we do in these, I mean, they process a lot of special uses and variances, and we get notifications on all those, and we typically look at them and see if it would likely have an impact on an immediate neighbor if it's next to the city boundary. But if it's something substantial that you would like notification of, certainly we would be happy to bring that. But like I said, the likelihood of a cultivation center not requiring an annexation agreement if it is immediately adjacent to the city, I mean, unless there's no sewer anywhere around, I think it would be unlikely. And since we're talking about areas that are pretty well built up, I would imagine that there's sewer within connecting distance. But if staff or John has other conflicting information, please correct me.
Any other questions? Dennis?
Maybe you could refresh my memory about under what kind of conditions a craft grower would be operating as opposed to a cultivation center. I assume that this is a smaller operation, but a cultivation center requires enclosed space, no windows facing the public, certain air scrubbing qualities and things that have to do with industrial kind of production of cannabis. A craft grower would still be required to grow the crop within an enclosed space. Is that correct? We don't allow any growing in, say, an open area. Is that correct? And it would also have to be fenced. Is that correct as well?
I am not familiar with the state's requirements for craft growers. I will say that the definitions that the county uses are identical to those used by the city in its text amendment. So this would essentially be the city considering the exact same uses in the ETJ as it's permitting within its corporation limits. So the county would require the same mitigating operations as far as noise and light that the state requires, that the city also requires within the city boundaries.
And if I'm remembering correctly, the craft grower starts at up to 5,000 square feet, but I believe it could go up to 14,000 maximum in the state statute. John, do you recall if that's the number?
That's approximately the number I recall, and in no instance can you grow cannabis anywhere other than inside a closed building.
Yeah.
That's required across the board.
Sharice, you had a question?
Yes. I was wondering, okay, Lori, didn't we just recently approve a craft grower over here in the 3rd Ward, a company?
Off of Federal Drive, I think it was.
Yeah, Federal and it's Kenyon, I guess, Kenyon Road, that area. And okay, so what are the specifications regarding, if you can recall, because my recollection is that it would be within an enclosed space, that there would be a fence separating it from every other area, because I did drive over there to look at the space, where the space is, and it's I know it has to be more than 300 feet away from anyone's home, which it appears to be. I think it was
within the 300 feet, and that's why they needed the special use permit.
Right,
it was close, but yeah.
But it was something like 298 or something like that. It was a very small. I remember it being a very just a couple of feet short of the 300 feet, but because it was enclosed, and there's supposed to be all kinds of security around it and everything else. Mm-hmm. So I think, Dennis, you're if that helps you at all, my understanding is that the craft grower space, you won't even know that it's a craft grower space. It's like a warehouse, because it's all indoors.
Right, I think you're right.
Any other questions? Bill?
So if a cultivation center wanted to locate on Windsor or High Cross or something in there, that in our comp plan where we already have designated, we would like that to be residential or commercial. Normally under our current zoning, a cultivation center wouldn't be allowed there. So even with an annexation agreement, we would probably have to rezone it to be industrial, right?
Or something, yeah.
Where else is a cultivation center allowed in our zoning? Is it allowed in agriculture?
I think it is with a special use permit. Marcus, do you have that handy?
And in any case, it would need if it was to be annexed, it would need a city special use permit and possibly a rezoning.
So the maps that Kevin prepared for the city's zoning text amendment, were only drawn out to the boundaries of the city. They did not project that out into the ETJ. For craft growers, for example, the land that Walmart is on would be a by right use area for craft growers. The land that Berkey's is on along High Cross Road is a place where a special use permit would be required. The land that Riggs Beer Company is on, as well as the fronts of the 3 parcels to the north of that, with 1 parcel in between, those would all be land that a craft grower could be on with a special use permit. So those are far enough away from residential use that a craft grower would be allowed with a special use permit there according to the city's standards. Looking at cultivation centers along High Cross Road, the land that Berkey's ag is on would allow a cultivation center there with a special use permit. So I think if we extrapolated the city's zoning for cannabis uses beyond into the city, we would find that a lot of the land that is east of High Cross Road, being 300 feet away from residential districts, would be available to be used either by right or special use permit.
And Bill, because I heard something in your question, I just wanted to make sure I heard it right and correct it if I did. You made reference to a comprehensive plan and whether or not we would need to rezone something in an annexation agreement. The determination on whether something needs to be rezoned in an annexation agreement is based on the base county zoning. There's an automatic conversion there. So if the base zoning is ag in the county, the automatic conversion would be a residential use in the city. So that is probably going to be the case there. But I just wanted to make sure that we remember that it's based on the county zoning, which out there I imagine is mostly ag.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that helps. I imagine that you run into conflicts a little bit then between the comp plan and the current zoning.
That would be accurate.
A different issue, I guess. Okay, that's my question. Thanks.
Bill Colebrook.
So the recommendation says, based upon the findings above, staff recommends the City Council defeat a resolution of the protest. And it appears that part of the justification for that recommendation is number 3, the proposed text amendment is generally compatible with the land use policy goals and the objectives of the 2005 Urbana Comprehensive Plan. Then number 4, a proposed text amendment would not pose negative impacts to land uses or to the ability of the city to manage growth and the development of land currently within the city. I guess my question is very simple. So what would happen if we did number C, approve a resolution of protest? What is the impact of that?
If City Council approves a resolution of protest, they're basically saying that they feel that the zoning amendment would negatively affect the city's ability to direct or manage growth in its corporate limits or within its ETJ, and that would require Champaign County Board to vote a supermajority in favor of passing their zoning text amendment. It doesn't stop them from doing it, but it raises the bar higher.
I guess, I appreciate that response, but I guess my question is, I'm as much as I'm trying, I'm failing to find a compelling reason why the council needs to vote on this. If basically, they're coming to us with this. This wasn't our issue; it's theirs. And even if we did defeat the resolution, there would be basically no negative impact to the city.
I will ask for confirmation from Lori, but I believe part of our zoning ordinance and potentially part of city ordinances is that City Council is required to review amendments to county zoning amendments or map amendments and provide comments.
That's correct. So that's based on state law. State law gives the city the opportunity to either protest or not protest in these cases. And in order to make the record abundantly clear on how the city feels on something, we use this method where you vote on a resolution so that it is clear that the city has spoken, rather than relying on an opinion or not acting on a resolution. This just makes a very clear record for the county board.
And to be clear, the staff recommendation basically is saying, even if we did defeat the resolution for the protest, there shouldn't be any significant harm to the city of Urbana and our way to operate going forward.
That is correct. I think Mr. Brown, as well as Mr. Hopkins during the Plan Commission meeting, found those very low probability things that might happen where, there's an already existing business that has a sewer tap that would need to not have any expanded use, and that would allow that use to become a cannabis use from some other agricultural use. There is a very low percentage of something happening that would slip through these checks and balances of it not needing a special use permit from the county, so the city would never find out about it. And it already has the tap that it needs and doesn't need an expanded volume capacity. I think probably 99% of the uses that would come in of cannabis uses, the city would know about, and the city would end up being involved either in providing comments to the county or being negotiated with by the developer to say, we need a tap and therefore we need an annexation agreement.
I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Okay. Jared.
Bill Colbert, just wanted to give you it took me probably 2 years to wrap my head around defeating resolutions of protest. So don't feel bad. It's a very convoluted, backwards way of us approving something that the county is trying to do and saying that we're not going to get in their way, and they have our approval. Lori probably put it better this time than the first 8 times I heard it, and I was like, what? Anyway, I would like to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I'm going to move that we defeat. No. We have to move to approve and then vote it down. You got it, Eric. Move resolution number 2020-06-026R, resolution of protest against the proposed text amendment to the Champaign County zoning ordinance CC ZBA-973-AT-20 be approved.
Second this motion that we don't want to pass.
Moved by Jared, seconded by Eric. That was a motion 4, and if you don't want it to pass, then you'll vote no. Discussion, Dennis.
Yeah, I guess the one thing that I'm somewhat concerned about is if there were going to be subdivision development in the property along the western side of High Cross Road, and some of those parcels were deemed appropriate for cannabis craft growing, that if there was a craft grower established there, it would diminish the possibility of making a useful subdivision along that section of High Cross Road. That's my concern. Not that we really know how that land is going to be developed, but I think that was the intent originally when Menards said that they were going to develop there. They were proposing that whole tract become subdivision. And according to the memo we have here, when the proposed amendment is not in the best interest of the city of Urbana, the city adopts a resolution of protest on the amendment, and that requires a 3/4 or a supermajority vote to be enacted at the county level to approve any kind of construction there and to make that happen for them. And I guess I'm just not as much excited about some of the possible repercussions, which we don't really know are going to happen. But if they did, they might impede the development of the residential areas on the east side of town that we've been looking forward to. And I don't mind requiring the county to come up with such a strong feeling of positive expectation that that the 3/4 majority vote would be a problem. So I think what I'm going to do is try to support and to defeat a resolution of protest. That I want to support a resolution of protest because I'm concerned about it.
Okay, so your choices are: if you want to support the resolution of protest, you'll vote yes. If you want to defeat the resolution of protest, you'll vote no. Are you ready to vote? Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
No.
Mr. Jacobson?
No.
Mr. Miller?
No.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
4 yeses, 3 nos, so that resolution of protest is supported. Next item on the agenda is resolution number 2020-06-027R. A resolution approving a professional energy consulting services agreement with Good Energy LP. This is our municipal electric aggregation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, we have Scott Hess on the line.
Great. So we have 2 resolutions regarding our municipal electric aggregation program. Our current contract, our electric supply contract for residential addresses and small businesses expires at the end of the year. Our consultant has identified this week as the best time to go out for bid in our large multi-city purchasing group and get a new price for another term of municipal electric aggregation supply. That bid day was set as Thursday this week. There's 2 things we need to do to prepare to participate in that bid day. The first is to execute this consulting agreement. This allows the consultant to broker on our behalf with all the other cities. And it establishes compensation for the consultant with a small fee on every kilowatt hour purchased through the program. This is how we've paid the consultant for all the years we've been doing municipal electric aggregation. The second resolution authorizes the mayor to execute a supply agreement with the low bidder on bid day this Thursday. We do this ahead of time because the supply offer is only good for a few hours, and so we need to execute that contract right away. There's more details in the memo, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Any questions for Scott? Mary Alice.
So I'm looking at the municipal electric aggregation chart. Is there any way that you could share that, if you have the ability to share that chart, Scott?
Can Jason pull that up? I don't have it open on this computer.
Okay, I don't have it open either. I was going to say, if you are a co-host, so if you find it quicker than I.
And Mary Alice, I think you can bring it up.
Oh, okay.
I think I've got it here. Yep. Is this what you're referring to?
Yep, that's exactly what I'm referring to. So the idea of this aggregation is that basically we're able to leverage community power, community buying power, to hopefully be able to save the community money in their electrical bills, right? That's just kind of the basic idea.
Sure.
And so looking at this, we have the annual savings. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 years in which it actually cost us money. So I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Sure. There's essentially 2 dips where we were not competitive with the price to compare. That's Ameren's electric supply price for residential accounts. So the first dip occurred when there were some technical problems with the way that the municipal electric aggregation statutes were written, and the state had to reimburse a whole bunch of money on the rates, and that was a very temporary fix that the state had to do, and so that caused the Ameren price to be lower for a short period of time. The second dip occurred in the contract term that we're in now. That contract was bid at the end of, before the most recent presidential election. At the time, there was a lot of regulatory pressure on cheap electricity supplies, such as coal and natural gas, and a lot of expectation of further regulatory pressure that is requiring a cleaner production. There was an expectation of more of that. Prices were a little bit higher, but at that moment when we accepted the supply price, it was still lower than Ameren's price at that moment. And then the future did not turn out the way that we were expecting. We were expecting prices to stay high, and they went down, and they've stayed down. And so that's why most of this term, we haven't been competitive with Ameren's price. Now, there's a couple of things in this chart that are not obvious. One, part of what our ratepayers pay is for 100% green power. So the cost of buying renewable energy credits is built into our municipal electric aggregation price. And so that's different than what we're comparing to. Ameren's electric supply price is only meeting the minimum of the state requirements, which I think this year is about 18% green. And so in a certain sense, we're not comparing apples to apples. We're choosing to spend a little bit more to have green power. And the other thing that's not immediately reflected in this chart is also included in our electricity price is a small city fee. So that's a fee that compensates the city's time for managing this program. And so those are 2 things that are not immediately obvious in the chart.
When you said that the state requirements is 18% for Ameren, what is the requirement in this proposal?
We buy renewable energy credits equal to 100% of all of the electricity that we purchase through the aggregation program.
All right, so for the layman, can you explain what you mean by we buy credits?
Sure. So at the point that renewable electricity is generated at the wind turbine, at the solar panel, the kilowatt hours just go into the grid. It's like $1 in the bank. And you put $1 in, you get $1 out, but it's not the same dollar. It's fungible. They split off the renewable energy values or attributes into a certificate, and that's tradable. And then folks who want to buy renewable energy, they buy their certificates in one place, even though their electricity is just coming from wherever it comes from down the power lines.
Okay, so is it fair to say that I guess there are actually 2 purposes in municipal aggregation? One is to hopefully be able to leverage the community's purchasing power, so to speak, and 2, to be able to leverage that purchasing power so that we ensure greater use of renewable energy. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, and the purchase of renewable energy credits through aggregation is just a little under half of all of our greenhouse gas reductions that we've achieved.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions for Scott? Eric?
I think maybe another way of putting that, which is equivalent to what you've said, Scott, is that when we buy renewable energy credits, we're essentially motivating a larger fraction of energy development to be green. It's basically like making a little bit of an investment in green energy. If everybody bought RECs, it would shift the mix of power generation towards green energy.
Great. Dennis.
I know that about 2.5 years ago, a group from the University of Illinois students came and asked us to do a pledge for green energy growth and to reduce the carbon footprint. And the city council accepted that pledge. And kind of the odd thing is sort of that we're not really able to do too much as a city in terms of hard structural change to achieve a smaller carbon release footprint. I mean, the fact that we're have an urban forest helps convert carbon monoxide to oxygen, and so that is actually a plus for the community in reducing its carbon footprint. And we can convert, use smart conversions for the construction of the new projects that we're contemplating for the future. But what most municipalities are stuck to do is to buy these credits, which aren't even created in our own part of the United States. So we're pretty much kind of becoming green by buying virtual greenness rather than actually producing greenness. And that then makes us very proud to be green energy supporters. But it's really kind of a fake way of doing it. And so, I mean, I support the idea of conversion and ecology as a part of the city's future goals. But I always feel like it's sort of an iffy situation to rely upon buying RECs to really achieve them. And so maybe, Scott, I don't know if you have a crystal ball, but can you guesstimate what the trend may be now in the United States for returning to renewable energy sources as a significant goal on the federal level?
On the federal level, there's been a lot of interest and support towards fossil fuels. On the state level, we have several years ago, the state passed the Future Energy Jobs Act, and that dramatically increased the amount of renewable energy actually being built in Illinois. That funding is now running out, and so there are several competing bills in Springfield to extend and expand upon that bill. And that, whatever replaces that, will be crucial in continuing the renewable energy development within Illinois. And that includes Urbana. So, for instance, the low-income community solar development that we're partnering with SunPower and NextAmp at the landfill is dependent on and is made commercially viable by the Future Energy Jobs Act incentives.
Yeah, and I really support that decision to convert the landfill surface to a solar farm. On the other hand, we have in the county area people who are really agitating, at least a company is agitating to create a coal mine processing plant, et cetera. So, I mean, you have the yin and the yang at the front doorstep here.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead with this one more time. I mean, I'm willing to invest in the attempt to reduce our greenhouse gas through this electrical aggregation process. And I've supported it as an individual paying my bills. But, it would be great to see the bar, the graph rise up again into the positive numbers for the community.
Would you like to make a motion?
We're going to have 2 years this time instead of 3 years to look at the results, right? All right.
Sharice, you had a question?
Yes. I guess what I wanted to ask is that when it comes down to it, Scott, does the aggregate good energy people, do their kilowatt hours come in less than Ameren or
Yes.
after?
Yes. When we get bids for a municipal electric aggregation supplier, if there are no bids that are cheaper than the Ameren price on Thursday when we have our bid day, then we will not accept any contract.
Okay.
Now, Ameren resets their prices every year. So, next year they may reset their prices lower than the rate that we fix. We fix a flat rate, so there's predictability there. But 1 year contracts are generally, 1 year contracts are generally not encouraged. There's more administration and you don't get as good of prices.
Okay.
The other thing I mentioned, we're in a large bidding group with lots of cities. Cities will need to agree to the same term contract, which will probably be 2 or 3 years. That's where the group is coalescing around. But that will be decided on our bid day.
Okay, so right now we don't know what the good energy kilowatt hour is.
Right. We have some indications on what the consultant thinks the prices will be, and we will be sharpening, driving the vendors to sharpen their pencils all the way till about noon on Thursday, and we will get final bids and for different terms, and the cities collectively will choose a term and agree to that price.
Do you know what hour costs?
Say again?
Do you know what Ameren's what they charge per kilowatt hour?
I think I think the price to compare is
4.7 or something.
Let's see if I can find that and double check, but I think it's 4.55 right now.
Okay. So I just want to understand, so that other people might be able to understand too. So.
Yep, I just opened the document. It is 4.55 is the price the bidders have to beat.
Okay, so they have. So if now that 4.55 does not include the city fee.
Correct.
Okay,
it
so
does
it could
not
be
include the renewable energy credits either. Those are add-ons. Those are optional add-ons.
Okay, so the let's say they come out with 4.50, and when we add the city credit, which is I think it says Central Illinois, at least that's what it's between 0010 and 00.0020. So we could add that on that would be added on to the cost of the kilowatt hour. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I'm just wanting to get some understanding. Okay, I just wanted, and so the RECs are 0.00057 per kilowatt hour?
They're going to be, I think the indications we're getting is 0.00115 is what the consultant has told us.
Oh, okay.
We're expecting this week.
Okay.
The 0.00075 is our consultant fee.
Oh, well, now I see something here that says Urbana residents are paying 0.00057 per kilowatt hour toward purchase of RECs.
Oh, I think that's our current our current contract.
Okay, but it could be less.
Yes, those prices fluctuate. They're a market.
Now, do these prices fluctuate after we make the bids? Do they continue to fluctuate, or are they fixed?
We fix all of those prices.
Okay.
For the term of the contract.
Okay.
Bill, you had a question?
Yeah. So it looks like the last 3 years haven't worked out very good. The price went down. We were expecting it to be stable, and hopefully this will kind of catch us up to the current pricing. But right now there's about a 20% difference. It looks like our price is 5.65, and you said the price compares 4.55. So for the next 6 months, anybody that uses a lot of air conditioning or uses electric heat in summer would probably be a good idea to switch to Ameren. Could probably save some money. I wonder if we could at least get that information to Danielle so that her clients know, and anybody else that. I mean, this is probably the prime period, where the difference is bigger right now than it has been the whole contract. Yeah, especially if you're using a lot. It seems like the next 6 months it makes sense to switch back to Ameren.
Okay. Does anyone have a motion? Eric?
Oh, I was going to say something, but I'll say something useful. I move that we enter into this this agreement that Scott has described.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll do that. And I'm going to read the resolution number just to make it official.
Thank you.
Resolution 2020-06-027R, a resolution approving a professional energy consulting service agreement with Good Energy LP Municipal Electrical Aggregation. And I'll make that second with the great hopes that as the year progresses, we'll see big changes.
And any further discussion? Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes. Last resolution on the agenda is resolution number 2020-06-028R, resolution authorizing execution of a service agreement with the lowest responsible bidder for the supply of electricity for residential and small commercial customers who do not opt out of such a program.
So I'll make a motion that we adopt that.
Okay, moved by Dennis.
I'll second that. Do you want me to read it? Or did
I just read it.
Okay, all right.
It's the same one. Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
I had to
Bill's waving his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who
I
was
just
waiting?
wanted,
Bill?
yeah, I just wanted to add. I haven't switched to my electric to Ameren, but I'm not a big electric user. I mean, I have gas heat. I don't use electricity much for air conditioning because I just have a couple window air conditioners. I think if you want to stay in it for the long haul, you probably at least break even, and then you feel good about doing a little bit toward green energy or something. But I think my point mainly was for big users and bigger families and stuff that use a lot of electricity should probably think about switching to Ameren, at least for the next 6 months. That's all. Thanks.
Okay. Sharice?
I do have a question. It says who do not opt out of such a program. Are we talking about residential users, Scott?
Correct. The only accounts that are eligible for municipal electric aggregation are residential accounts and small commercial accounts. There's a per kilowatt per month limit. Mm-hmm. So we opt in. Aggregation works by opting in all the residents into that aggregation price. And then at any time during the term, individual account holders can opt out of aggregation price, they can go to Ameren or they can go to another third-party retail electric supplier.
Okay, the other question I had as well, because at one time we had used a different electrical supplier. Is there Ameren? I'm not sure if it's, I don't know if it's Ameren, or I'm not quite sure who has control of it. There's a charge for supplying the electric. Is that the same with this particular bid?
That's the portion that we're talking about is just the supply portion.
Mm-hmm.
The other fees, they're fixed. They're regulatory, and so you're still going to pay Ameren for maintaining the grid, and that's what most of those fees are. And then the fee that we all have a choice on is just the supply portion.
Okay, but Ameren will. Is there a fixed rate that Ameren charges, or is it according to whoever they're getting the energy from?
So for someone who wants to choose Ameren Electric Supply, Ameren publishes every year. They publish a rate. They set a new rate.
Okay, and do they set a new rate, or do they? Is their rate different when it's just Ameren supplying the electricity, or does it cost more when you are getting your energy from someone else?
So Ameren is they work with the state to buy electricity, and so they fix the price for 12 months, similar to what we do over a longer period of time. Folks can also choose a completely different retail electric supplier, which will have their own price and their own terms.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No.
Sorry, just one more. I pulled up my October bill just as an example. That was a real low usage because October you don't really use heat or air conditioning, but my total electric part of it was $31. Electric supply was $9, and the rest of it was delivery. And the only thing we're really affecting with this is electric supply. So we're affecting about maybe a third of the total cost of electricity with this purchase agreement. So even with, like in this case, even if I was saving 20% by switching, it would be like $1.52 a month. It wouldn't be a lot, but it would be, maybe 3 times that in the summertime. But for bigger users, it would make a bigger difference.
Okay. I think we're ready to vote. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes. Right, next up is a closed session. I'll need a motion to go into closed session to consider collective bargaining issues pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2C2.
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Jared. Who was second?
I think I should,
Eric?
Eric.
Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Oh, Mayor, question?
Yes.
There's both an A and a B. Are we going into closed session for both reasons?
A has been removed from the agenda.
Oh, I see. Thank
So
you.
it's just the collective bargaining. Forgot to mention that at the beginning.
Thank you.
Okay. Can you please tell me who moved and second that again, please?
Oh, Eric seconded.
And Jared moved it.
Jared,
Okay.
Eric, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Mayor,
Yes.
you get to vote on this one. You vote on this one, Mayor.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll now leave this meeting. Kate will email you the link for the closed session. We'll go into closed session and then come out and rejoin this meeting and then adjourn. Okay, we have everyone but Bill, Jared, Dennis, Sharice, Bill, Mary Alice, Jared. Waiting for Eric.
Eric is coming in now. I've got to rename him. It defaults to his university name.
Okay. Okay. So I need a motion to come out of closed session.
So moved.
Moved by Jared, seconded by
I'll second.
seconded by Mary Alice. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts, Ms. Wu.
Yes.
I said yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
I was muted. Okay.
Okay, that motion passes. And with no further business before the special council meeting, this meeting is adjourned and we'll move immediately to the committee of the whole meeting, which will be chaired by Mary Alice Wu.
All right, for the fourth meeting of the night. This is the committee of the whole meeting. Will the clerk please call the roll? Phyllis, if you're trying to call the roll, you're muted.
She's unmuted. I think she's just getting her papers together.
Thank you.
It's a lot of books to move around. Okay, Mr. Brown,
Here.
Mr. Colebrook,
Here.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes. Here.
Mr. Jacobson,
Here.
Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mr. Roberts,
Here.
Ms. Wu,
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
First item on the agenda is approval of minutes from previous meetings for June 1st, 2020. Can I have a motion?
I'll move approval of the minutes.
I'll second.
Moved by Jared, seconded by Bill Brown. Any discussion?
I wanted to know if Wendy could let us know if she has all of the emails from Wednesday and Monday for that, and how exactly they were going to get put up after we approve the minutes.
So the minutes were incorporated in there from the 1st and the 3rd only. The ones from the 8th and the 10th, those will be, they will get approved on the next city council meeting.
I meant the 1st and the 3rd. I'm
Those-
sorry, Wendy. I meant the 1st and the 3rd.
Yes, those are already incorporated in your minutes. If you looked at it, you had over 110 pages on there, and that is because you have all the emails incorporated onto those minutes, and they will be posted on the website.
Jared, you're muted again.
Just wanted to make sure we had all of those in there.
All right, any discussion? No? Do we have to do a roll call, Wendy or Phyllis?
Every vote.
I think so, yes.
Okay, all right. Can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. Wu.
Yes. All right, are there any additions to the agenda tonight?
Yes, I had one. It would be an ordinance amending the liquor code. It would be to change a liquor license from one classification to the other.
So would that be under number 8?
It would be number 8, yes.
Okay. Do we need a motion in order to add that to the agenda? I believe we do.
I'll make that
You
motion.
just
that
need
we-
a voice vote on it.
I'm sorry, Phyllis?
Okay, you just need to make a voice vote on that to add to the agenda.
I thought we had to do everything by roll call.
Yes.
I don't think you need to do that by roll call. That's just adding an item to the agenda.
Okay, well, Jim wants to say something. Jim?
Due to the recent amendment to the Open Meetings Act that went into effect on Friday afternoon, I believe it was, the language to the new 7(e) section of the Open Meetings Act provides that without distinction, any and every vote must be a roll call vote, as long as there is a declaration of emergency or disaster declaration. We're still operating under a disaster declaration, as loose as it may currently be. So yes, you need a roll call vote for everything, including all the things moving on to city council, or for that matter, with or without recommendation.
Okay, so Dennis, we're going to make a motion to include that in the agenda.
I did.
Thank you. Is anybody second it?
A second.
Moved by Dennis, seconded by Sharice. Phyllis, would you like to do the roll call?
I certainly will.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
You want to vote on this one, Mayor? I guess not. Okay.
Okay. All right. So that item is added to the agenda underneath the resolution, the 2 resolutions on the agenda. So the next item is public input and presentations. I'm going to start with public input via Zoom, and then I'll double check with Diane. There's 2 emails that I saw come in before 7. I just want to make sure that they were not supposed to be read or if they've already been read. So we'll go to the public. So the first person here is Dr. Evelyn B. Underwood. Let's see here. Jason, are you supposed to unmute him or am I supposed to unmute him?
They should be unmuted now. Dr. Underwood?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
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 Yes. I did not get an opportunity to email, and there's so much going on, but I have been speaking through my organizations. And yes, I am concerned about what's going on. And I appreciate all the people who are working through their organization and speaking out what I want to do. And it seems so unimportant probably, but it is important to my community to say that we're still concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision. And I would like that to still be a part of the record. And I hate to even talk about it with so many important things going on with people dying and all. But I'm sure that people know that I care and I am concerned, and I am speaking through my many organizations and through the marches and all. But I still must say that we're still concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision, a sewer problem. And I need to really get that in. So that's what I'm going to say tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. The next person is Christopher. You have 3 minutes. I'm sorry, I should have said that earlier to Evelyn.
Hello, Christopher Hansen from Urbana, Illinois. I am wondering, last week, I think we heard from Mary Alice Wu say something about, let's have some about police reform, and let's have that every week at every.
Chris, I'm sorry, you're breaking up. It's hard to hear you.
So today, people about police reform, and can you hear me now?
Better.
A little better, yes.
Okay, I'll just try to speak slower and louder. What I was trying to say was last week we heard from Mary Ellis Wu that she would like to hear City Council talk about something concrete every week at every City Council meeting about police reform or CPRB reform. And this week we had another day where we had tons of public input with a lot of input from the public, and we didn't hear the council say anything. As far as I didn't hear anyone say anything about the issue. So I'm just here to remind you that many of you have talked about having a dialogue, and it is not at all clear to the public how we're supposed to have that dialogue. It seems very one-sided. So we're waiting to hear from you. We're waiting for that leadership, and we're not seeing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish? Oh, let's see here. There is an Alan. You should be unmuted in a moment.
Yes, thank you. So the main thing that I wanted to comment about was that one point in the past from City Council has been that they don't have authority when it comes to dropping charges against Aaliyah Lewis. However, one of the points that has been brought up and that I am reiterating is that you can recommend that the charges be dropped. That is well within your authority. In fact, you don't even have to wait for a majority on the City Council to do so. Each and every one of you can make a statement, a public statement for people to cite, saying that you believe that the city of Urbana should be recommending that the state's attorney drops charges against Aaliyah Lewis. We've seen a lot of different tone-deaf actions from the city as an entity recently, including putting photos of Police Chief Seraphin, one singular photo, prominently on the most recent newsletter as a celebration of the protests. Yet those very same protests were calling for his non-reappointment. So the main thing here is we're waiting for what statements and non-statements you are making each and every week. This has been going on for 2 months now. There is nothing stopping you from saying that you, individually or otherwise, believe that charges should be dropped against Aaliyah Lewis. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I believe that is all of the people who are in attendance right now. Diane, I was trying to keep track of the names of the people who sent in public comment for today, and I had an Aiden Watson Morris that emailed before 7 p.m. I don't know if you were able to read that one.
Let me check. No, I didn't read that one.
Okay, and then the other one is Alana Ackerman.
I believe.
Yes, she read that, Mayor.
I did read that one.
Okay, so the only one that was emailed before 7 p.m. then is Aiden Watson Morris. My name is Aiden Watson Morris, and I'm a graduate student at UIUC. I'm emailing to call on the Urbana City Council to meaningfully oppose police brutality in the Urbana community. I stand with community members calling on the City Council to address police brutality in light of recent events at both the national and the local scale. I support calls for the charges against Aaliyah Lewis to be dropped and an independent investigation of her arrest by the Urbana police to be conducted with the officers who assaulted Ms. Lewis put on leave pending the results of the investigation. Additionally, I share concerns about the Civilian Police Review Board and support the calls for substantial reform that would make this board a more meaningful oversight. The Urbana City Council must address the serious concerns of its community regarding the Urbana Police. Thank you. All right. So the next item on the agenda is, do we have presentations tonight? Do we have one?
Sure. Could I just put one thing in there that I was shared a photo, since we're again not in council chambers, of about 50 people gathered outside and end white silence, and it's something we might have seen if we were coming in. I don't know if they're still out there now, but they were there from at least about 6:30 until about 9 o'clock that I'm aware of. Some of them may still be out there, but we're not seeing that. But I just wanted to put that into public input that we do have folks who are demonstrating in front of the city building tonight, as they have for now 2 weeks in a row.
All right, thank you. So presentations, Dennis, did you want to say something?
Sure. I think that it would be fair to say that the city council members are actively working on preparing the first opportunity for a public dialogue, and that an announcement about that will be happening in the near future.
Thank you. Presentations. Do we have any presentations tonight?
We do have a presentation. This is Carol Mitten. I believe Chuck is going to make a brief presentation to give you a little bit more background. Chief Loss, sorry. Give you a little bit more background on the deputy fire chief position that we are proposing to fund in the budget.
Okay, so I'm going to try to share this screen here real quick. All right, did that?
No, unfortunately, we can't see anything. Now something's starting. Yep, something's starting. There we go.
Okay. So, Mayor, Council, staff, and guests, thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to share this with you tonight. I appreciate the chance that we have to bring this forward to you. This has to do with our deputy fire chief position. And hold on here. There we go. Okay. First, the need for a deputy fire chief. Again, this assumed the position of the fire chief in his or her absence. So this position would step up and take the fire chief's position when the fire chief is out of town for any reason. This position would address the SOGs, the policies, and procedures of the department. Would be create a consistent training officer's position, which we have not had that consistency on a 40-hour position in a very, very long time. Would lead the emergency medical program in updating the training for emergency medical training for our firefighters so that we can maintain the intermediate status that we have committed to our community. It allows us to manage the administration of the fire department while the deputy chief would focus on the operations day-to-day processes of the fire department. It evenly distributes the current workload by the administration staff, again, that division of labor, helping to make things more efficient on the day-to-day processes. Why now? The organization is flat and unsuccessful in its current structure. When I started here about 18 months ago, one of the things that I did mention was that the organization, as the chart shows, is a very flat organization, and the leadership administration side of things is very limited on the 40-hour side of being able to carry out those day-to-days. There's been really no structural change in this fire department, in the Urbana Fire Department, for the past 20 years. Approximately 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, the department had some transition when Champaign Fire and Urbana Fire absorbed the University of Illinois Fire Department. That was the last big change that happened in the Urbana Fire Department, and it has not changed since then. The administrative workload has exceeded beyond what the administration staff can successfully manage at this point right now. There is so much stuff going on, and we continue to absorb programs that we cannot successfully maintain with the administrative staff that we have currently. We're working to build a solid succession plan. We would like to promote our next leadership from within our department. That is our focus, is to train and maintain our leadership staff so that they can be promoted up through the organization. And then, again, develop that strong leadership organization so that we have those strong leaders that can step up. This is the proposed organizational chart that we're looking at this point. The addition to that is adding the deputy chief between the chief and the division chiefs. The difference with this from what we currently have is that deputy chief position is not inserted there. The deputy chief, again, will serve as number 2 in command. Will have that ability to step into the fire chief's position in the chief's absence. Right now, I rolled 1 week over from last year. Have all of my vacation right now because it's just difficult to get out of town and to use that vacation time because there's so much stuff going on. This would help the fire chief, whether it's myself or whoever, moving forward, to be able to get that break, to go to training, to go to out of town for whatever reasons. The responsibilities for this position include serve as fire chief in the absence of the fire chief, supervise the division chiefs, setting goals, doing evaluations, and again, putting those expectations out there so that the division chiefs, again, will grow and be part of that, solid part of that succession plan. They'll oversee the annual review of department guidelines and policies and procedures. This is something that has not, our SOGs have not been reviewed for the past 5 years. We really need to get after some of this stuff and start to define and redefine our guidelines and our policies and procedures. This person will supervise programs, the training program, health and safety program, the advanced emergency medical technician program, and the emergency management. They'll be a part of supervision or leading those programs. They'll be the coordinator for the special operations, setting up the training, setting up deployments for hazardous materials team and the technical rescue teams, and any other duties that are assigned to support not only the fire chief but the Urbana Fire Department. The value of the deputy fire chief, it provides depth, and again, we're looking at that depth to be able to create efficiency and effectiveness from our leadership team, building a strong foundation for future growth. And again, I cannot emphasize enough that succession plan that we want to put in place so that we can start to build our leadership from within and to promote from within. Distributes the administrative workload, that division of labor, that being able to delegate and to build and counsel our younger leaders so that they can be strong leaders in the future. Consistent department training program, which is extremely important. Right now, our training officer is one of our division chiefs. Our division chiefs work a 24-48 shift, and the training officer is sees one shift at a time. For them to see the other two shifts, we have to fill in positions so that they can work the next 2 days. It improves the organizational safety profile by making sure that they are a safety officer on the emergency scene, training opportunities, and at a small part, they're going to reduce some overtime costs when I would have to hire back a person to backfill if I go out of town for any reason. Some of the costs, position does create 1/2 FTE, and that half FTE would be a fire inspector to backfill the elimination of our fire marshal's position. The creation of a deputy chief will come from our fire marshal's position when the fire marshal decides to retire in September of this year. The net recurring cost on this is going to be approximately about $72,000 annually. The other thing that I put on here, the focus of public education program will be reduced with the reduction of the fire marshal position. It's kind of a quick run through. Do we have any questions that I can help answer?
You're muted, Mary Alice.
I thought I undid it. Thank you. Are there any questions for the chief? Eric?
So is the $72,000 incremental cost, that's anticipated to kick in if we create this position, not in fiscal year 20, not in the fiscal year looming, but the fiscal year after that? Or when would that start?
This would start, we're anticipating this is going to start October 1 in the budget 2021. So it will be this October 1. The fire marshal retires September 4th of this year. We're anticipating that the promotional processes will take effect so that we are hoping to be able to put somebody in place October 1 of this year.
If I can ask a follow-up, how common is it for fire departments approximately our size to have a deputy chief?
Thank you for asking that, because that was one of the things I did want to mention back here on the org chart. This is really consistent to what all other fire departments look like. There is a redundancy or a backfill, if you will, so that the fire chief has got an assistant, whether it's deputy chief, assistant chief, whatever that verbiage is that they use. It's also consistent from within our own organization. Our police department looks very similar to this. They have that number 2 in command. So this org chart that is showing right here is consistent across the fire service, also consistent internally with our comparable internally.
And is it also quite common that when a fire chief retires or leaves, that the deputy becomes the interim chief while a permanent one is looked for?
Yeah, and that is generally what happens. Is the number 2 in command becomes interim, and many times because of a succession plan, because of building your leadership, that number 2 person becomes your number 1 person. Again, from being able to promote from within.
Yeah. And promoting from within is, I mean, this is going to cost a bit each year, but promoting from within is generally a lot cheaper than doing national searches.
Generally, yes.
All right, Dennis, did you have a question?
Well, I don't know. As I remember, we did actually create a new level of promotion within the department about 6 years ago when we created the lieutenant positions. But I'm not real sure that I'm remembering this correctly. But I remember we had a discussion about that, and I think that's how the lieutenants were created. to allow promotion from within the department and personal growth. Of course, I don't think Chief Loss would remember that because he wasn't here.
No, I would not.
That's fine, though. Thank you.
You bet.
All right, does anybody else have any questions for the chief? So I guess I get to ask my own questions. I
Sure.
have one about, you had mentioned that the public education would be decreased. I'm wondering if you could speak to what that entails.
Sure. Right now, our fire marshal is into the Urbana school districts, schools very regularly. By reducing the fire marshal's position from a full-time to a part-time, we have to look at things that we're going to slim down. I mean, things that we're not going to be able to do because of that. So we have to look at our priorities. Our priorities are our fire prevention permits, making sure that those are completed, code enforcement, plan reviews, working with community development department and doing some of the plan reviews to assist with that. So we had to look at things that we were going to, how we're going to restructure this a little bit with that part-time person. And this was one of the things that we scaled back from that fire inspector doing any of that.
So primarily the work that the current fire marshal does when he goes into the schools to talk about safety and how to act, the stop, rock, drop, and roll that we normally hear. Is that correct? And then I think that there is a week, a fire safety week at used to be at Lincoln Square. I don't know if that's still there, but are there plans to cut that as well?
No, our Fire Prevention Week is something that nationwide is always supported, and we'll continue to put some of our firefighters that are working 24 or 48 shifts. We'll put them on that project so that we don't lose Fire Prevention Week. It may not look like it has in the past, but we have talked since I've been here that maybe we revitalize our Fire Prevention Week to make it look a little bit different and change it up a little bit so that the kids are going to see some new things in the upcoming year. So Fire Prevention Week is something that we still are champions of.
Okay, all right. If there's no further questions for the chief at this time, I don't see anybody raising their hands at me. Okay, it is 10:25. And we still have all of the staff reports and the resolutions. Thank you, Chief. I'm sorry. Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks for the opportunity.
I'll make a motion to extend the meeting by 30 minutes to 11 o'clock.
I'll second that then.
All right. There's a motion on the floor to extend the meeting until 11 o'clock. Is there any discussion? So I guess I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. Jared, would you take the chair first? No, sorry, Eric. There you are. Eric, could you take the chair for a moment?
I'm happy to, yes.
Thank you.
And Mary Alice, I'd be happy to recognize you.
Thank you. So I'm curious, we've got the capital improvement plan. We have the collective bargaining agreement. Are there other staff reports? I'm trying to ascertain whether or not we can get through it in 30 minutes.
Nothing. There's nothing else except the ordinance that the mayor mentioned about amending the that one liquor license.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Eric, I'll take the chair back if that's okay with you.
Mary Alice, I'd be happy to give you the chair.
Thank you. All right. So that motion was made by Jared, and who seconded that motion?
I made the motion, Dennis Roberts.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dennis made the motion. Okay, will the clerk please call the vote?
Sorry, Phyllis, let me unmute you here, and now you can.
Okay, Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. Wu.
Yes. All right, onward. So staff reports. Carol, do you have a staff report? You don't have a staff report?
I do not.
Okay. Does anybody else have a staff report tonight? I don't see any. On to resolution number 2020-06029R, resolution approving the capital improvement plan from the executive office.
So Will Kolchowski is here with me, and we are not going to walk through all the spreadsheets. I'm going to share some sort of high-level overview thoughts that I want folks to have in their minds as they think about the CIP, and then we are prepared to answer questions, and Will is prepared to bring up any spreadsheets that you want to talk about. I wanted to emphasize that, you know, we've been doing these long-term studies, and the CIP reflects what we have so far, and it will continue to reflect that. So you see the full impact of the facilities master plan in the CIP that we've proposed, and then we will continue as we finalize the stormwater master plan, and we have some of the information on the pavement condition index, but we haven't been able to fully integrate that. But you will see that going forward, that we're building on these studies that have told us the status of our infrastructure. In the coming year, particularly on the transportation side, we're prioritizing studies and design development so that we can be ready for external funding opportunities. I want folks to understand and remember that the CR&I fund is the only source of funding for facilities unless there is grant money available. But these funds that have recurring revenues are not available for facilities. So that puts a lot of pressure on that fund, and the CR&I fund is replenished using general fund dollars. There is no way to pay for the implementation of the facilities master plan without borrowing. So you'll see in the CIP that we have built into the projections $10 million bond issuance in calendar year 2022, which would bridge two fiscal years. That is for planning purposes at this point, because we still have to, figure out what our financial position is. But we just all have to recognize and get comfortable with the fact that the facilities master plan can't be implemented without borrowing. And so I also want to share that there will continue to be pressure not only on the CR&I fund, but on the motor fuel tax as we think about funding more streetlight installations or conversions to LEDs. And then as we gave you a little preview 2 weeks ago, we will be coming to you next year with a more fully fleshed out plan to upgrade our traffic signal equipment. And so that can be paid out of motor fuel tax or CR&I, but that's yet another draw on those funds. So just want to emphasize how important getting comfortable with borrowing will be. What you really need to focus on in terms of passing this ordinance that's before you is FY21. This is not a commitment to the future years. This is us looking forward and trying to give some sense of how we see things playing out. Just like we'll have to revisit the budget, the operating budget later this year when we have a better sense of the impact of the pandemic, we will be revisiting the CIP, and we'll be revisiting the CIP again next year as well. And we haven't factored in any grant money that we're not certain of getting. So that will be all to the good if we're able to compete effectively for grants. And I do want to mention, even though this is not something that the city is going to manage, but we're fairly certain of getting the SPR grant, the statewide planning and research grant, to do the initial study work for Florida Avenue between Lincoln and Vine, and that will be managed by the Regional Plan Commission. So with that, I would entertain any questions that you have. And as I said, Will is here with me, and we have Justin and Vince standing by. If you have any questions about projects or so forth, we can bring up spreadsheets or whatever you'd like to talk about.
Thank you. Questions for Carol or other staff? Bill Brown.
Yeah, just on the in the project book where you have associated master plan, it seems like bike master plan and pedestrian master plan are listed pretty often. Is that just because, like say pedestrian master plan indicated there were some ramps that needed to be fixed on Fairlawn Drive, or are there? I don't even remember if that's a bike route. How did you decide whether to use whether to put those in the associated master plan?
You want to take that one? Will's going to answer that question.
Will's going to answer it? All right. Will?
All right. So that one is if the transportation project kind of addresses some component of one of the master plans. If the master plan calls for something, ramp work, or if the project kind of touches a component of the plan, that's how the plan gets into the project book. So it's not necessarily direct correlation, but if it kind of touches it, it gets in there.
So is that just kind of in there as a reminder when we get to the engineering of that project to consult those plans?
Yeah, and I think it's also, the project book is part of like, why are we doing it? Well, it's in our plans, or, there's something in the plans that say, that we should be doing long term. So it's kind of also a reminder of the justification.
Okay, because some of those do have priorities already within their own plan. I don't know how closely those priorities are aligning to our capital improvement plan priorities. Did you guys look at that at all?
What I would say about that is we were very focused on condition at this point, but we also, you'll note from under the other in some of the project pages, you'll see that one of the associated master plans is the SCIL report, which is the selected crash intersection locations. And for every one of those that's in Urbana, there is a project associated with it. So safety has been a big factor also in setting this initial set of priorities.
Okay, that's great. And I'll just point out that we haven't actually approved the pedestrian master plan yet. I don't think that's come to council, but it will soon, I guess.
Yes, one of these days. We should have said draft or unapproved or something like that.
Thank you.
Dennis?
Yes. I'd like to ask a little bit about when we do the upgrade in Savannah Green, we have a lot of, they're designated as alleys. If we rebuild those alleys, and are they going to be torn out and recast or repaved?
One of the things that Green. Yeah, Savannah Green. One of the things that we hope to do is actually get some advice about what's the best approach to use in Savannah Green, given the significantly deteriorated condition of the alleys. So replacing them in kind might not be the solution. And, we've talked about different materials that we might want to use. So we're looking for some advice from a consultant about what the best approach is, given how significantly deteriorated that the roads in Savannah Green and the alleys in Savannah Green are in particular, but also being mindful of the fact that we have this same looming problem in multiple subdivisions that we need to address.
Yeah, so I was wondering that if, of course, I guess we don't really know exactly how we're going to reconstruct the alleyways. But if they were to be, if the current cement, as I recall, their cement pavement cracked and pretty badly damaged, if they were to be removed and new cement was laid down, would we reconsider them to be now streets? if they were resurfaced completely from the ground up, or would they? Were you imagining that there would be a different substance like macadam or some other substance that would replace the current surfaces?
Yeah, I think it's highly likely, and if Justin wants to jump in here and while I'm playing engineer, and I think I know enough to answer this question correctly, that it's unlikely that it's going to be a concrete surface.
Okay, so I was thinking if they were going to pour new concrete, maybe we should call them streets because they're acting as streets. All the driveways for all the apartments are using them as if it were a street. Of course, it's not maybe as wide as a street, but if we're going to be putting down gravel and macadam or some other substance that's more of a secondary matter kind of use, like a paved alley, yes, I could see that. It would also be more cost effective too.
Right.
All right. Just curious about it because that's quite a big project and a serious one.
No, your line of thinking is consistent with our line of thinking.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks. Just curious about it.
Are there other questions for staff? All right, I had a question for staff. So one of the things that we hear consistently is that everything kind of comes to a head at the same time. So one of the things in terms of a plan, in terms of how to move forward, is to kind of space those out. And if I saw correctly, the two smaller firehouses and then the also larger firehouse are items that need to be replaced. And I think that the one on Lincoln and the one on Philo were kind of rated at a higher level of need. So I guess what I'm saying is that would it make sense to be able to spread out the rebuilding or the modifications to those so that we don't all of a sudden have our entire fire department need to be rebuilt?
So interesting question. So in each case of Fire Station 2 and Fire Station 3, you're right. They were highlighted as in being in condition that they needed to be replaced in the near term. In each case, our intention is to build a new fire station and keep the existing fire station in service until a full changeover can happen. So we won't be down a fire station at any point. The other piece of it is that in talking to Elizabeth about timing of projects and stuff, originally we thought let's just even it out over time so that we're not having any big spikes in the amount of money that we're spending. But she advised, given that we do need to borrow money, that the best thing to do is to borrow money in one bond issuance and then spend that money. So that's why you see kind of it chunking the way that it does.
Okay.
I hope that is responsive to your question.
Yes, it is. It is. Thank you. Are there any other questions or stuff, Dennis?
And in relation to what you just said, Carol, is it likely that you will have an architect design both fire stations to be identical and use the same floor plan?
I think that's possible.
All right, just wondering. That would save money as far as designing goes if you came up with a really nice plan that was fit the lots that they're built on and the staffing requirements. It would, you'd want to have a fire department that looks good, but it would be nice to save money and have them, if they're going to build them at the same year or within a year of each other, you could save money with the planning.
Sure, and then people won't be fighting over which station they're working out of. They'll just be the same.
Fairness in every respect.
All right, I do not see any other questions. Can I have a motion?
I'll make the motion. I'm going to move, hold on, let me pull that agenda back up. Resolution number 2020-06-029R, resolution approving the capital improvement plan be sent to the full council with a recommendation for approval.
Okay, I'll second that.
Moved by Jared, seconded by Dennis. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing none, would the clerk please call the vote?
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
I need you to understand you are afraid, so it makes you. Percy. That's
Yes.
stupid. Jacobson.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Wu.
Yes. That goes on to City Council with a recommendation for approval.
And just for the record, there was a background noise, and I don't know that I ever heard my name, but I'm a yes as well.
Thank you, Bill.
As am I, Dennis Roberts.
Yes.
All right, do you have a full accounting, Phyllis, of everybody who voted?
I do.
Thank you.
It's K.
Oh, Kay. You're on.
Phyllis's phone died.
All right, onward to resolution number 2020-06030R, resolution approving a collective bargaining agreement with International Association of Firefighters Local 1147. Is this going to be Elizabeth?
Yes. So I can make this fairly quick. I do want to recognize Steve Doggett, who is virtually in the room with us, and now we can see him, who is the president of our IAFF local and was a big part of getting this contract done. So just a few things to point out for those who have not had time to review the memo. So this contract is a 2-year contract with IAFF. It will provide across the board wage increases of 1.5% for each of the 2 years. There are some modest adjustments to the longevity schedule between years 18 and 25, and that's just to kind of help us keep pace with comparable communities. That's important to us in terms of recruitment and retention. There are some additional increases in the second year of 1% for engineers, lieutenants, and captains, and that addresses a wage compression issue. And those are really the most significant items in the agreement, but I'm happy to answer questions, and I'm sure Steve would be willing to also.
Are there any questions for either Elizabeth or Steve? All right, I don't see any. Sharice, you don't have your video on, so if you want to say something, you'd have to unmute yourself. No, okay.
So I would make a motion.
Diane, did you
the mayor
want
wants to speak
first? Diane?
Just wanted to give a thank you to both the union's bargaining team and the management's bargaining team. As we noted earlier, this contract was done, I think, in 4 bargaining sessions. Both sides came prepared, both sides were trained, and I truly appreciate the very productive way in which this was concluded. And just for the public's knowledge, in years past, we hired outside counsel, outside legal team to do these negotiations, and sometimes it could be very combative and drawn out and expensive. So when we brought this in-house, it really has changed the tone and the ability to get these done. So I appreciate the hard work on both sides.
Thank you. Dennis, were you wanting to make a motion?
Yeah. We've learned that good due diligence was done on both the union representatives for the fire department and staff, and we appreciate the harmony and the hard work. And therefore, I'd like to move resolution 2020-06-030R, a resolution approving a collective bargaining agreement with the International Association of Firefighters, Local 1147, for a term of July 2020 through June 30th, 2022, forward to the City Council with approval.
Second.
Moved by Dennis, seconded by Sharice. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing none. Kay, will you please call the vote?
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Colebrook,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Hersey,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Wu.
Yes. All right, that moves forward to City Council with approval. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Elizabeth. Appreciate it. The last item on our agenda is a liquor license. I don't have it up for me right now. Diane, if you're going to present this, could you read out the number, the ordinance number?
This is ordinance number 2020-06-034, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 3, Section 3-43. It's increasing the number of Class C liquor licenses for Mama Tried LLC, doing business as the Rose Bowl Tavern, 106 North Race Street, Urbana. As you may recall, a number of weeks ago, the Rose Bowl requested that they change their liquor license classification from Class C or Class A to a Class C. No, I'm sorry, Class C to Class A. And that was during the pandemic and allowed them to, I'm sorry, Class A. They were Class A, which is a bar. They changed to Class C, which is a packaged liquor store. They've operated as a packaged liquor store for the past few weeks. Now they want to switch back to Class A in anticipation of moving into Phase 4 and reopening as a bar. So this would increase the number of Class, and I need to correct the title of this ordinance. It would increase the number of Class A liquor licenses from 10 to 11 and decrease the number of Class C licenses from 23 to 22. So they're going back to what they were previously.
All right, questions for Diane? All right, can I have a motion?
I'll move approval of the ordinance as presented, be sent to the full council with a recommendation for approval.
I'll second.
All right, moved by Jared, second by Eric. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All right, Sharice.
Yeah, is this are they going to have to pay again to get a different liquor license, or will they be able to operate based on the fact that they're just going back to what they used to have?
We've waived the fee.
All right, any other discussion? Okay, will you please call the vote?
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Colebrook,
Yes.
Hersey,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes, and I can't wait to go back.
Roberts,
Yes.
Wu.
Yes. All right, that motion goes on to, sorry, that ordinance goes on to City Council with recommendation for approval for next week. With no further business before this committee, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everybody.